So, hey guys, are you frustrated with where you're at right now? Maybe stunted in your progress? Well, if you are, I want to recommend a place for you to go called Growth Day. growthday.com/ed. It is the #1 personal development app on the planet. It's got all kinds of high performance techniques in there, courses, accountability, journaling, live speeches from some of the top influencers in the world, including me. It's an overall environment to change your life. growthday.com/ed. Where are we economically? Because I think this dictates where we are in our lives and our money. Last time you were on, you said, look, I think we're in for a winter. I think it's going to be a long one. I'm curious as you evaluated at the time of this recording, because clearly things aren't great. You've got a couple wars going on. There's disarray all over the planet. But then on the other hand, in the United States, inflation seems to be getting somewhat under control. Unemployment's not real high. I go to a mall, it's packed still with people in there buying stuff and consuming. So based on all of those conditions you see, what's the state of the union right now in your mind?
Well, if you study history, and I think you and I have talked about this before, everything moves in cycles, and they're pretty predictable cycles. So, I always tell people that if you want to be good at anything, investing, you want to own a business, you want to have a great body, you want to dance, you want to sing, anything you want to do, you need 3 skills. The first skill is you got to have pattern recognition. If you see anybody that's good at anything, they recognize patterns and it makes them not fearful. And then the second thing is pattern utilization. It's nice to see a pattern, but if you can use it to your advantage, you become a great investor. You become a great business person, right? Because you know the patterns and you're not fearful because you know these patterns happen over and over again. And then eventually it's kind of like if you play other people's music long enough, you're able to create your own patterns, right? You build on what you've learned. So I want my kids to learn those 3 skills because as AI is coming, there's so many beautiful technologies. I know there's a lot of fear about them because anytime something new comes, especially with the capacity of AI, there's going to be a lot of fear that goes out there. But you have to decide, you're going to live in fear. I was talking to someone the other day and they're like, we're on the verge of, a nuclear war, World War III. And I said, okay, well, you're going to sit here and worry about whether a nuclear bomb is going to be dropped on you. Let me just tell you, if it happens, you won't even know it. You'll be vaporized. It'll be over. So you don't need a courageous man dies one time or woman, right? A coward dies 1,000 times. Because every time you imagine it's there. So we're living in a season that is predictable if you study history. It goes in about 20-year cycles. And think of it this way. There's a springtime where everybody's optimistic. If you run a business in there, you look like a genius. You're just in the right place at the right time. We then have a correction time, more challenging time, a summer that tests you. It's hot and difficult. And if you don't take care of what you've grown, it falls apart. If you make it through those 2 seasons, you get to fall where it's a reaping time. It's beautiful. It's easy. Somebody wants to loan you money for a house and you don't even have an income. You know those types of days, right? Easy money, right? Interest rates are nothing. You can do it all. And then we always have that followed by a winter, right? And winter, it looks like it's going to be bad forever and people overreact. So if you look at those 4 seasons, you start looking around and you can see that if you look back and you look at humanity back, when we were hunter-gatherers, we had a lot of fear because we hadn't recognized one pattern, the pattern of the seasons. Once you know seasons, you don't plant in the winter. It doesn't matter how hard you work. You do the right thing at the wrong time, it's not going to work. You got to plant in the spring and you got to take care of it in the summer and so forth. Once we learn that, we could stay in a community, we could build. There's patterns in terms of, think of 4 seasons of a person's life. 0 to 21 roughly is kind of springtime. Some of us had to go to work at 13 or 14 years old, but most people are pretty protected for the most part in their youth. People tell you what to believe. They teach you how it's supposed to be. But then you enter 22 to roughly 42, and you're the soldier of society. You're that person that goes to war, literally. You're the person who goes into business. And now what happens is you decide to test what you believe. And you think you're unbeatable. You're going to be president of the United States. You're going to be a billionaire. You're going to have 100 perfect relationships simultaneously, and everyone's going to be happy. And then in your 30s, you discover, holy shit, a relationship's not that easy. I'm not a billionaire yet. And so you get humbled and you start to grow, but you also test. 43 to 63 is the power season. That's the reaping time if you planted in the spring. Otherwise, it's a weeping time if you didn't, right? True. If you worked hard in those first 2 seasons, you and I both can do more with our pinky now than we work 24 hours a day. And if you work 24 hours a day now, you can move mountains, right? Because you know the right people, you know the right principles, you know the distinctions, you can cut through to it. Now I have 111 companies now doing $7 billion in business. That's a real understatement. It's the conservative number estimate. It's actually much higher than that now. But to give you a perspective, I mean, I couldn't even run 3 companies at one stage, right? You know, it was overwhelming to me. So your skills get stronger. And then think of 64 to 84 to 104, 120 is the oldest humans. That's the winter time where you now are more of a mentor in society. You know who the hell you are. You're not trying to convince yourself or anybody else who you are. If they don't get it, you don't really care. You just want to give back and do beautiful things because you've lived life long enough. And then you look at how are things different in the 60s and 70s compared to the 50s. Very different values. The 80s, 90s, 2000s, very different values. And so people grow up in different environments, but if you live long enough, we're all going to be tested. We're all going to go through all the seasons. So it's a long way of saying, where are we right now? If you study history, we're in winter because the primary emotion is fear. And things get magnified in this environment. Social media now is a tool that does that. The regular media does, and they're good people. They're not trying to do anything but meet their job. Their job is to make more money for the shareholders. And the way I do that is get your attention. That's why I have clickbait, because it doesn't matter whether the story is good or not. If you click on it, I'm paid. And we all know fear sells. So that's why we live in the world we're in. We're in this for a period of time. Not all winters are the same everywhere on Earth. And right now, America's still positioned to do pretty well. We have a lot of challenges that have to be faced. There's a lot of change that has to happen for us. But I'm optimistic. And I also know that these people that people look down on who think, you know, they haven't had it hard, there's some truth in that. You know, you grow up differently when everything's at your fingertips on your phone. But what's really nice is the challenges will make them strong. Because here's the history of the world in 4 sentences. Good times create weak people. You can see it in 1,000 years of Roman history over and over again. You can see it in Greek history. You can see it anywhere. So good times create weak people. Weak people create bad times. Bad times create strong people. Strong people create great times. And then it happens again. And you can see this history after history. So I'm optimistic about the future because we have so much technology that can change things here in the United States. We are leaders in that. AI is one of those pieces. But there's also technology changing our bodies. We talked about this last time because I wrote the book Life Force and interviewed 150 of the best regenerative scientists in the world. I mean, we're 12 years from what they call longevity, you know, the term they use, what is the term they use? It's longevity escape velocity. What that means is, what it means is in 12 years, you know, if you talk to the very smartest people in the world, you know, that are the best in the world at what they do, like Ray Kurzweil. He's been the most accurate predictor of technology, bar none, in history. Or you talk to George Church from Harvard, who's the geneticist. They both say about 12 years roughly is what they both estimate. Every year, our technology will allow us to be a year younger physiologically as long as we don't get killed in a car accident or something like that. So if you take care of yourself for the next 12 years, roughly, maybe it's 15, you're going to be exposed to technology, change everything. CRISPR is eliminating some diseases. The first one approved is dealing with sickle cell. It was just done last month. And they can literally cut it out of your genetic code. And so you don't get it, but neither do your kids. I mean, this is wild. So it's not that simple. There's moral decisions to be made. There's going to be consequences to any new technology. There's going to be disruption. But overall, we have an incredibly bright future, not because I'm optimistic, because I'm not. I'm a realist. I just look at the history. I see how things work. When we make it through winter, it'll be a new springtime. It won't be forever. Will that be another 4 years, 5 years, 7 years? I don't know. But we will get to the other side, and then it'll be optimism again for another 17, 18, 20 years. These history patterns are there. So the real secret is there's 2 worlds you got to master, your own internal world and the external world. You can't control the external world. You can influence it. But if you take control of your mind, your body, your emotions, and your actions, you can have an extraordinary quality of life in winter. People freeze to death during winter. Some people ski, snowboard. They build a fire. They build their business. So it's up to you. Instead of complaining about the season or pretending it's not winter, you want to take advantage of it. I grew up, started my business in 1977, 78. That's how old I am. And we had 18% interest rates. So when people complain about 8%, you know, I just think of like, if they were 18% right, people will be sacking the White House, you know, saying this is insane. True. But that's the world we're in. So we're living in a challenging time, but an exciting time. And most of the problems we're facing, whether it's crime in the streets, a lot of that's driven by policy, whether it's the wars we're talking about, whether it's fighting internally within people, the common disease that everybody has is selfishness. And when you don't face enough challenges, you focus on yourself a lot, and it never makes you happy. The cure is love. I know that sounds corny, but love is when you care about something more than yourself, whether it be your children or your community or your country or, you know, the people that you want to serve, feeding people, whatever your thing is. Those are the things that give us energy and allow us to succeed. So we need to just stop complaining and put ourselves in a place where we make ourselves more resourceful and more resilient and get stronger. You know, instead of praying, Lord, help me, it's like, make me stronger so that I can turn these things around. And that's my approach to things.
I love that. It's turned in for a lot of people, Tony, though, world events, the economy, it becomes their primary obsession. It just does. I mean, more than ever, because what you said, the media, social media. And there's, you know, one thing I tell people recently is like, you're kind of hiding in that obsession to some extent. I mean, if you can be so obsessed with what's going on in the world and the conditions of the world, you don't have to pay very much attention to what's going on in your world, in your family, in your finances. It's one of the reasons I wanted Tony's event to be promoted is because those will be 3 days where you can focus on your world, your inner world, so you can change your external results. And so, again, join Tony100.com. Go register for that event, guys. It's a big deal. I wanted to ask you that, like a harder question. And that is, how does someone condition change? So you used the word patterns earlier, right?
Yeah.
And in both of our work with different people, they've got where they've got because they've developed these patterns. And maybe they do read a book or they come to a one-day event or something like that. And there's change, but how do you condition change in somebody? Is that what you would call immersion over a 3-day window? Or is it some habitual change when they get back that's task or routine oriented? Conditioning change is kind of the rub. I think it's like the next level of advice that's given to somebody that, you know, I don't see being discussed very often. I think it's a hard question. So I'm curious as to what your answer is about conditioning a change.
Well, let me give you 2 quick answers to it. One is how I did originally, because I didn't know how, right? I started reading all these books. The first book I read when I was, just 17 years old, my mom kicked my dad out. She chased me out with a knife. I knew she wouldn't kill me, but I wasn't going back in that house. And I was like, okay, I'm walking in the rain trying to figure out what to do. I stayed in the laundry room on the second night, first night on the hill and it rained. So the next night in the laundry room of a friend's. And I had a small amount of money, like, I don't know, 19, 20 bucks. And I took the bus and I went to this bookstore I'd seen years before. And I got this book called The Magic of Believing by Claude M. Bristol. And in the book, it talked about conditioning your mind. And that it talked about not affirmations, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy. And your brain goes, BS, you're not happy. But incantations is when you speak it, you engage your body with such intensity. Now, today I understand when you want to change something, you change the body, you change your focus, and you change your language. When you change all 3 of those things radically, somebody's depressed, uses their body a certain way, they talk with a certain tone of voice, they focus on what they can't control, they focus on things in the past they can't shift, they focus on what's missing. It's not hard to figure out what's going to happen. They use words like, I tried, I can't, I don't know. There's what I call a triad. These 3 things are done a certain way when you're depressed. If you change that person's body radically, the tempo they speak, their voice, you change their focus to what they are in control of, you change their language, everything shifts. Well, when you do incantations, think of like affirmations, only speaking it aloud with total intensity over and over again with repetition. It's like conditioning your mind, your body, and your emotions at once. So I was working in these 2 banks. Mom kicked me out. And they were in San Marino, California, near Pasadena, California. And I worked there. I was still in high school. And I would take the buses there because I didn't have a car. My mom kept my car. It was a 1960 Volkswagen Bug. And I got there and I cleaned the banks because it wasn't by the hour, it was by the result. So I cleaned 2 banks. I was really good at it. I did a really good job. And I finished by 2 in the morning. I get on the bus. By 3:30 in the morning, I'm home. I go to sleep, wake up on 4 hours sleep and go to school. It was pretty brutal. One night I come out of the bank. Changed my entire life. I'm waiting for the bus, waiting for the bus, waiting for the bus. 45 minutes, no bus. There's nobody around. It's 3 in the morning. I got to get home. What the hell am I going to do? I know I can call and do this. I'm a million miles away. So all of a sudden, a guy comes creeping down the street and he rolls down his window and goes, hey, buddy. So I'm at the bus stop. He goes, didn't you see the paper? There's a bus strike. There's no way to get home. So what did I do? Part of it was initially anger with my mother kicking me out. And I'll show her. But then I remember I read this book. So I was doing these things every day, at every way I'm getting stronger and stronger. Every day, at every way I'm getting stronger. Every day, in every way I'm getting stronger and stronger. Every day, in every way I'm getting stronger and stronger. I did that for the first 20 minutes. Then happier and happier, healthier. I ran 13 and a half miles. I never run 2 miles in my entire life. It
Wow.
became the power that I still tap into this day. I literally found a part of myself by demand, by conditioning, by the end of that, like I was utterly certain what I can do. You know, when you see an athlete, a kicker, you know, on a football team, a basketball player about to do a free throw, and you think they're going to miss it, you can tell before they release the ball or kick the ball, they're going to miss it. You see they're lacking certainty. When you look at somebody like Steph and he releases that ball and he turns and doesn't even look and it's already a swish, people go, oh my God, he's a genius. No, he's being rewarded in public for what he's practiced 1 billion times in private. Steph told me he shoots, and I've seen him, 500 shots every single day of his entire adult life from the time he was a teenager. But just take his 15-year career, 500 shots a day, 14,000 shots a month, 168,000 shots a year, 15-year career. That's 2.52 million shots he's taken to make 3,300 and be the greatest three-point shooter in history. That's conditioning, right? You do it, you do it, you do it, you do it. But there is a way to speed it up. When Stanford came to me and wanted to do that study on depression a couple of years ago during COVID, they wanted to see, they saw the results, they couldn't believe it, right? People that get depressed, they had 2 professors that had gone, no more clinical depression whatsoever. So they wanted to do the study. Most people, 60% of the people that get treated with drugs or psychological treatment are still depressed. That's the meta studies. 40% improve, average improvement 50%. They're half as depressed. They did it with us. 100% of the people after 5 days from Date with Destiny, not a single person. A year later, 11 months later, nobody did it. 17% of the people had suicidal ideation. None was suicidal ideation. How did that work? Well, we changed the perceptual filters, what people focused on, what the things meant to them, what they do. But we did it for 5 or 6 days and nights of total immersion. And since they followed me for 3 years biochemically, they were interested because they discovered this biochemistry that Tom Brady experiences, that the Tampa Bay hockey team that's won so many Stanley Cups, you know, the Lightning have done. They go into a state, if Tom Brady's down in the 4th quarter by 10 points and he's got 2 minutes, there's no way you're going to win the game. Something happens to him biochemically that happens to me every time I'm on stage because they measure me for 3 years. They call it the championship biochemistry. My testosterone surges to a level that's insane, but so does my audience. They follow me. So at that level, anything you think about, you remember. That's why the retention is so high. You remember where you were in 9/11. You don't remember where you were in 8/11. You don't remember those moments because there's not enough emotion. There's so much emotion. Secondly, normally there would be a huge amount of cortisol. That's the stress hormone that gets in the way of your performance. For Tom, for Tampa, for me, my cortisol drops through the floor while my testosterone is rising. That puts you in this state of absolute push, certainty, and drive. Doesn't guarantee you're going to win, but it increases your chances about 100-fold. My audience, not only my live audience when we went during COVID to digital, where I had people in 195 countries participating, like we're going to do, for example, for the 3 days. They went around, sent people to 15 different countries, took their blood just like me, took their saliva, measured them. Every single one of them went through this exact same pattern. And that's why 11 months later, 72% decrease, and I've never seen them again, 72% decrease in negative emotions, 52% increase in positive emotions. In business, it's all engagement. They measure engaged, disengaged, actively disengaged. Engaged, you're really into it. Disengaged is like quiet quitting. You do the minimum. Actively disengaged are people that are angry and actually trying to screw you over in your own business. COVID's 4 years destroyed engagement more than any time in the history of the measurements, at levels no one could even dream of. The one that grew the most was active disengagement, people actually angry, trying to mess up the company. We did in 6 days, they're doing a 1-year study. Most studies like this are a month to 3 months. Largest one they've ever done, 750 people. At the end of the 6 days of Date with Destiny, 5.5 days, every single person was higher than they were before COVID, meaning their engagement was through the roof. But what's really cool is they're measuring it. The year ends this month, but I saw the 6-month review. Every month they increased their engagement and their effectiveness, and I never spoke to them again, never saw them again. Why? Because it's in their biochemistry. Why? Because they have whole new filters in their brain. So you can do it through incantations, or you can do it through some form of immersion. They took the best professor at Stanford, who won all these awards, had him teach my exact content as a contrast group, word for word, but without the things I do to change biochemistry. And he still got 300% increases and retention that he's never seen before on the content. But mine was 3,000%, right? And his wore off after, I think it was 8 weeks, and mine a year later was still producing the results. So there is a science to changing your conditioning. So you can do it rote by incantation, do it rote by having new rituals. There's so many ways you can do it. But the most powerful way I know of is total immersion, where we engage your biochemistry and your emotion. And what's so cool about it is time disappears. You know, when you ask people, what's a long time? Some people say a century, some people say 2 minutes, right? A long time is anytime you're not enjoying yourself. You know, a minute can feel like eternity if it's a horrible experience. But if you're having a great time, time disappears. And you know, even the events, we go 12 hours a day, literally around the world. When I'm doing my events here, like the last event I just did to hear Date with Destiny, we had people in 195 countries. So it's every country in the world. We had we'd start here at 10 a.m. It's already midnight in Australia. They go from midnight to about 1 in the afternoon for 6 straight days in a row. And we lost 1% of the people, to give you an idea. It's that engaging, right? They're in a whole different time zone. It doesn't matter. They're in the zone and our biochemistry has changed. And so that's why I love books. But the reason I still do seminars is because there's nothing like an immersion experience like that. And now people can do it from anywhere on earth, or they can come in person and do it too, because now that COVID's over, we do both.
Yeah, and that's, by the way, this event at jointony100.com. I want you to go. It's just, that's because you have immersion over 3 days. Here's what I just want you all to do. So I'll give you my simple language from that. Success, bliss, achievement, ecstasy is a biochemistry.
Yes.
It's a neurochemistry and a biochemistry. And so if you want to find those states of being, it's a biochemistry. And so just for a lot of you, something really simple to do. When you're training physically, if you work out, you run, you walk, these are times where you should be anchoring your goals and your visions of your life when you're in that elevated state of neuro and biochemistry. It's just a much more powerful anchoring and conditioning for you to create a change in your life. And so elevated emotional or physical states and anchoring the things that you want in your life, your visions and your goals and your ambitions. Now you're anchoring the biochemistry and the neurochemistry. The likelihood of those things happening and repeating themselves becomes that much higher. This is important stuff for you guys. I want to navigate. It's an interesting conversation because we're going to navigate, you know, our inner world in our lives and money in this conversation today. As you described, Peter Diamandis, your dear friend, was not on very long ago. It was just a few weeks ago. Peter was on. We were talking about exactly what you're talking about, life extension. And if you can stick around another 20 or 30 years, you may get an additional 20, 30, 40 years on the back end of your life, which is great. But the other thing I think about is, means you need more money. If you're going to live longer, you got to have more money. If you're going to be living to if people pass away now in their mid 70s, and that the potential that many of you that are listening to this in your 30s and 40s or 50s will live past 100 and maybe significantly past 100, this financial question becomes even more paramount in people's lives because you're going to need more of it to live. And so I want to start out with some basic things that you teach, and then we're going to get some pretty complicated, not complicated, but sophisticated, interesting stuff, everybody. So first things first is you kind of have these 4, what I'd call basic principles regarding money that I think most people aren't familiar with. I mean, the conversation about, you're not taught it in school, you're not taught it in college, it's not taught in most families, but I love these principles, everything from the diversification to asset allocation. Why don't you just start with that, Tony? Just illustrate kind of the framework of having a financial education or some financial sense.
Well, first I'd say the biggest challenge for most Americans is they are not owners, right? Most Americans are consumers. We have all this advertising to consume. So if you're going to own an iPhone, you know, maybe you want to own Apple, you know, because that iPhone is going down in value and you're going to get a new one. Why not have own the company? I'm not saying you got to buy Apple, but I'm just giving as an example. Become an owner. Become an owner, you got to do something very basic. Everybody spends all the money they have, and you have to make one discipline and make the decision that says, I'm going to create a freedom fund, whatever age I am. I'm not going to wait till it's too late. And I'm going to take 10 or 15% or whatever percentage of my income and never see it. I'm going to arrange it to automatically go into an account, and then I'll figure out how to invest it. But I got to not see it, because as long as you don't do that, you're not going to get where you want to go. There's a guy that I talk about in one of my early books who worked for UPS. Theodore Johnson's his name. He never made more than $14,000 a year and retired with $70 million. How is that humanly possible? Because one of his friends said, we're going to make you wealthy in your long term. He goes, I'll never be wealthy. I make 14 grand a year. He goes, you're going to be wealthy. We're going to take 20% of what you earn, put it aside and invest it. which by the way, he put it in UPS primarily. He was a driver, but later became, a low-level executive. And people loved him. He loved delivering, and people loved the state he put him in. They look forward to seeing him. But 20%, he goes, I can't do that. I can't live on what I have. And the guy said, if the government passed a law and said you had to pay 20% more taxes, you'd scream, you'd yell, and you'd pay it. So you got to set a number in and automate it. And then where do you put
interjection on that? Just interjection real quick. I want you to keep going. This is a really important point, guys. You guys know that I built a financial company for 30 years.
Yes.
And here's the false belief system. And then I'm going to let Tony rip through this because it's awesome. People think once I get around to making a lot of money, then I'll start saving this 10 or 20%. Here's what my experience is. If you can't begin to save money, even when you're at a lower income level, you will not do it ultimately when you make more money. You'll upgrade from the Honda to the Lexus. You'll upgrade from the apartment to the condo. And then when you make a little bit more, you go from the condo to the single family residence, the Lexus to the Mercedes, and you never get around to having that money you never see end up in savings and investments. So it's critical you begin to find a way to do that at any level of income, somehow, some way. Go for it. Back to you on that.
Spot on. And if you do it in the early days, I mean, if you're a kid and you put aside $300 a month because you got low overhead out of your money, you can start that at 17, and because of compounding, you could stop that literally at, if you start at 17, you could stop at 27, and you put very little money in, and it'll grow to almost $2 million if it just put it in the stock market at 8% compounded return. If you wait till you're 27 to start, you're going to have to invest till you're 65, and you'll still have less money. So the sooner you start, the better. Also, your point also relates to philanthropy. People go, yeah, I'll give money when I'm rich. One thing I figured out early on, if you won't give a dime out of a dollar, you're not going to give 10 million out of 100 million or a billion out of 10 billion. And so when you do that, by the way, you teach your brain there's more than enough. So that's the philosophical part. I've done 3 books, 2 of them, this third one's just now coming out, but both the other 2 are #1 New York Times bestsellers. So the first one was Money Mastered the Game, then Unshakable. And when I was doing those books, I went and interviewed, none of it was my opinion. I said, let me interview the smartest people in the world financially, the Ray Dalios, the Carl Icahns, the Warren Buffetts, the Paul Tudor Joneses. And I knew a lot in this area. I've coached Paul Tudor Jones, one of the top 10 traders in history, for 25 years now, I think it is, 24 years, something like that. And so I've seen every day what he does, all those times, coached him. I knew a lot. But when I interviewed these people, they're all different. And I was looking for, what do they do in common that makes them wealthy? I interviewed all self-made billionaires, nobody from the Lucky Sperm Club. And there were 4 core things they all agreed on, even if they did completely different types of investing. The first core principle is different. It's so simple, different than most investors. The best investors are focused on not losing money. If you ask Warren Buffett, he has this famous 2 rules. Step 1, he said, rule #1 to investing, don't lose money. Rule #2, see rule #1, right? Now that's easy to say, but most people are like, what kind of return am I going to get? The way they don't lose money is the second key. When I interview all of them, they all agree on one thing. There's only a few things you can manipulate to make more money. You can make better choices, like which stocks or bonds or real estate or whatever to invest in. You can have better timing. And then there's asset allocation. And when I interviewed David Swensen from Yale, he took them from $1 billion in their entire century of development. He grew their annuity to $31 billion during his time there. It's unbelievable what he did. He said, Tony, you're going to be wrong, no matter how smart you are about picking the right stock or bond. You're going to be wrong, and you're going to be wrong on timing. The only thing, 95% of your investment returns are based on what he called asset allocation, and they all agree with that. It means if I'm going to invest $1,000, $10,000, $1 million, whatever it is, I need to in advance have a plan of what percentage am I going to put in low-risk environments where I'm going to have low risk, but low return, but it's steady. It's like the turtle. And then I'm going to have some that are environments where there's more risk, but there's the potential for upside. And then how I diversify that to protect myself, not all my eggs in one basket, is going to be critical. Most people know that. Well, these guys have developed very specific asset allocations. And one of the things that happened when I went to go write this book, this third book, I decided I was going to look at a different type of investment, which we'll talk about in a minute, which is private equity, private real estate, private credit. Yeah. And when I did that, I interviewed some of the smartest people alive in this area. And I found out by doing my research, KKR, other people show that extremely high net worth people have a completely different asset allocation than the average person. They have 46% of their money, not in stocks, not in bonds, not in REITs, but in private real estate, private credit, and the biggest one is private equity. And so it's like knowing the formula. Third, third piece is really important. These guys are all smart enough to know you don't take giant risks, because if you have a stock worth $100 or $100,000 and it drops 50%, you have to make 100% to get even. If 100,000 drops to 50 and you grow it back 50, you only have $75,000. So they understand this. So they always look at risk differently than most of us. They look to see how they can get asymmetrical risk reward. That's a big word. It means, how do I take the least risk with the most upside? So Paul Tudor Jones, I've coached for this, basically quarter of a century almost. And with Paul, his whole philosophy is, I don't want to make an investment. I may be wrong, but I'm going to believe that I'm going to risk $1 to make 5, not risk $1 to make 10% or 20% like most people. I'm looking for a 5 to 1. That way, if I'm wrong, I can risk another $1, I still make 4. He can be wrong 4 times out of 5 and break even. So that puts the game totally in a different place. And so the problem is, most people don't know where to find asymmetrical risk reward. So I look for those places to show them. And then the final one is the one we all know, diversification. You want to not put all your eggs in one basket. Diversification is the only free lunch. And that diversification means diversifying, not putting all your money in one stock, not putting all your money in stocks. So it's not just the type of investment, the category, or you don't buy one piece of real estate. You got to diversify locations, elements. You got to diversify across timelines. So diversification is critical. So all of these guys agreed to those 4. So I was thrilled with what I did. And Money Master the Game is the most successful financial book of the last 24 years of this century, 23 years. So I'm proud of it. And Unshakable also exploded. But what I was fascinated by was, people are so crunched right now. The biggest question people are asking is like, how do I get those returns? And so, for years, bonds were so low, everybody put all their money in the stock market. And, for the most time, they got by with it. A few times there were significant drops, but it's only a matter of time before the system balances out. Now bonds have raised, right? And we've seen that you can get some returns on bonds in the 5% range pretty easily. But most people need more of that kind of return, a larger rate, to get to where they want to be financially. So this is the part most people don't know. 35 out of the last 35 years, private equity, which is companies that have their own money that invest in companies, they buy a piece of the company or all the company, they change the CEO, they change the marketing, they grow it. They don't just buy something hoping it'll go up, they make it better, and then they sell it for a multiple of the growth they got to a larger company, or they take it public. 35 out of 35 years across the world, average private equity has outdone every stock market in the world. So I'll give you an example. In the US, for the last 35 years, the S&P 500 is given a 9.2% return. So you're compounding your money on average 9.2%, which is damn good. But private equity, average private equity, not the guys I've got in this book, right? These guys, by the way, average 20% or more for decades, continuously compounding. It's mind-boggling what they do, because it's a totally different approach. And they don't have to sell when the market goes up and down. So when it goes down, they buy. When it goes up, they sell, because the money's usually locked up for about 5 years in most of these situations. So they have cash flow. They're in great shape. Anyway, think of this, 9.2%. Private equity average ones are 14.2. Now, let me explain what that means, since the average investor may not understand. This is mind-blowing right here. 50% greater returns every year, compounded year after year. So let me help you understand what that means. If you take a round number, $1 million you put in the stock market 35 years ago in the S&P 500, it's worth $26 million today if you never did another thing. It's pretty unbelievable. But if you put it in private equity, it's worth $139 million right now. That's why ultra-high net worth people have almost half of their money in private equity and only 29% in public equities. Public equities are still important. They give you liquidity. You got access to great companies. It's fantastic. It's not like you get rid of it, but they complement each other. But higher net worth people know, this is where I'm going to get the better returns. You got to fish where the fish are. And so that's why I got myself involved in this new book, because there's so much more than that in this area. But just to give you a little feeling for it. Tasteful.
There's also so much more than that in the book, by the way, everybody. And why does this matter? Because we're going to get to your life stuff and mindset stuff. I know all of you are like, hey, you have Tony Robbins on there, and you guys, the two of you better be talking about that, which we're going to in a minute. Why is this relevant? I'm so thrilled that you, many years ago, started writing these books, this trilogy. And here's the reason why. It's very difficult to have some element of control over your life if you're not trying to exert some type of control over the financial piece of your life.
Yeah.
So we're always talking about our minds and our bodies in the personal development space. And Tony was obviously the first person and the most cutting edge person to do that. But there are other elements in our life. And if you're out of control financially and you live that way for years and years and years and years, it has an impact on the other elements of your life.
Yeah.
And so understanding these parts of, it's the part of the success piece of the puzzle that's almost never discussed because it's that thing we're going to get around to doing eventually. That's like saying, I'm going to get my mindset right and I'm going to get around to getting my body together. We all know they're correlated, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So when we talk about this, Tony, you know, there's something you said in the book that I actually want to ask you for my own edification because I don't know. Private equity has been reserved for the wealthy for many, many years. And in the book, you allude to the fact that there was legislation pending that may allow eventually unaccredited investors to participate. It was a bipartisan type submission. Has that happened yet? And if it hasn't happened yet, what's the likelihood that it will?
Well, it's already passed the House and it was bipartisan. And when they come back from the holiday, they're going to vote it on the Senate and there's bipartisan support. And what it does, for the people unaware of this, these investments are the biggest returns you can get, but you have to have a special status to go there. It's like only the most wealthy people get access. It's so unfair. And so what's interesting is they say, well, because you got to be sophisticated. Well, no, you just have to understand how it works. But what's interesting is you might be wealthy because you built a business and sold it. That doesn't make you a sophisticated investor. So the new rules are that passed by the House, the Senate looks like it's going to as well. And the new rules are simple. You take a test and you become an accredited investor. Normally, you have to have $1 million net worth or $200,000 a year in income or $300,000 per couple for you to be an accredited investor, which gives you access to some of these. And then there's another level, which is a qualified purchaser, which is $10 million of investable assets, not counting your home. You can count your business. So those things have limited who has access. But even if you have money, it's worse than that. Think of it this way. It's kind of like the velvet rope to the best clubs. You know, you're out front and somebody wants to get in because it's the club to get in. These firms have such great returns that it's like buying an exotic car or the velvet rope. You know, it's like they're all gone right away. The pension funds get them, the wealthiest people in the world get them, right? The family offices get them. And so I, you know, because I had relationships, got access to a few of them, but I was frustrated. I couldn't even get in. And then it didn't matter whether I was qualified or not. I couldn't get past the velvet rope. You're out in the cold with your money. It doesn't matter. You can't do it. But here's the breakthrough. So in coaching Paul Tudor, I got to know one of Paul Tudor's partners who eventually started his own firm. And we were talking one day and I was talking about the unbelievable returns that come from these private equity, private credit, private real estate type firms and how frustrated I am because every time I want to get into one, I can't get in or I get this really tiny allocation that I can get in with, right? It's not meaningful. And he goes, Tony, he said, and he kind of dropped down almost to a whisper. And he goes, brother to brother, I should probably tell you where most of my money goes. And I said, well, great. I kind of leaned in. I mean, this is a brilliant financial guy, right? He goes, did you know that the word they use when you invest in these firms, they call you a limited partner, an LP. And if you own the firm, well, you own all the funds. You're the owner of the firm. You're, you know, CEO, CFO, you're in the C-suite, that type of thing. Then you're an owner. Well, the owners, they don't just make what the fund makes. They make 2% on every dollar you give them. And it's tied up for 5 years so that they have liquidity. So the market goes up and down. They don't have to worry about that. And they can make sure they give you the best return. So you tie up your funds for a little longer for a better return. Well, they get 2% a year, whether you make money or not. And then when they grow it, they get 20% of the upside. And that's standard in the industry. So picture this. Everybody loves guaranteed cash flow. He goes, you know, Tony, these are the wealthiest people in the world. If you go to the Fortune 400 and you say, who are the richest people in the world? Are they in tech? Are they in real estate? No, they're financial services guys. And they're not hedge fund guys because they go up and down. Some of them, but very few. It's the private equity guys. And he goes, so here, because they're making the 2 and 20. So imagine this, you have $1 billion and you're making $20 million a year guaranteed fees for 5 years, $100 million guaranteed. If they take their $1 billion firm and they raise it to $2 billion, they grow it over those 5 years, they get 20% of the upside. That means they made $100 million in fees, $200 million upside. That's $300 million on initial $1 billion investment. Now I have one firm I invested in when we started with them, they had 13 billion. They have 100 billion now. So they're making $2 billion a year in fees alone, to give you an idea. I get that 2 and 20. He said, you can become a partial owner of the general partnership. And like I said, I've got 65 firms now that I own 2 and 20 on. So I am literally a GP. I'm right beside them. And I get about, 10% a year in income. They vary from 5 to 10%, but about 10% of income. And they get the growth in the business. And if they ever sell the business, I get a multiple on the business. So this is like one of those almost unknown secrets. Even most wealthy people I know are unaware of this. When they hear this, they go crazy because it's the firm they're trying to get in, but now they own it. And I don't just own that fund. You get diversification. I get the funds they invested when there was low inflation. I get the funds that they're investing in now. I get the funds they invest in the future. It's a wild opportunity. So that's just one of them in the book. Another one is sports teams. I worked till I became fairly wealthy. And then I wanted to buy a sports team. And the first team I got in was the LAFC Football Club because we were starting it out. I was one of the original owners that started it up. And, we won a national championship. It was pretty cool. But the growth in it's been fun. It's been great. But I went through a year's microscope to qualify to do that. And you got to put some serious money on the line, right? To own a team, a piece of a team. Well, there's new rules that have been changed in the last 3-4 years. And if you have the right firm, there's only a few that do it. You can own multiple sports teams, small slices of them. And here's why that's valuable. The S&P 500 the last 10 years has had a great run, 11% compounded just in the last 10 years. It's 18% for Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, and soccer combined. To give you the idea, Michael Jordan bought the piece of the Hornets, what was it, 13 years ago, I think, 12, 13 years ago. He paid $325 million. He just sold it for $3 billion, right? My friend Peter Guber bought the LA Dodgers a few years back with a couple of partners, Magic Johnson, a couple other guys, and they paid $2 billion for the LA Dodgers. Now, no one had paid even $1 billion. The most ever been spent on a baseball team was $850 million. Everybody said he's insane. They've overpaid at least $1 billion. And I called Peter, my friend and partner, and I said, Peter, you're no dummy. I hear what everybody's saying. I know that you know something no one's telling you. And he's made 52 Academy Award nominated movies. He's a genius. And so I said, he said, I'm going to leave you on. He said, we're dear friends, but he goes, I want to leave you in suspense. I'm going to make an announcement next week. As soon as you hear it, call me and we'll laugh our tails off together. Sure enough, the next week they announce he bought it for $2 billion. He sold the local, not the national rights. You get a piece of every team's, an equal piece of every team's media. It's pretty cool. But the local you own. He sold the local rights for the Dodgers television for $7 billion. He made $5 billion immediately. So they're not just butts and seats anymore. They're media companies. 92% of the top 100 shows last year were sports shows in terms of viewership. And it's great because they don't have to, to make a series on Netflix, you got to buy the actors. You just set up your cameras and you shoot and you're ready to go. And everybody watches because of cord cutting. They still watch and they'll still watch the ads. So it's an incredibly lucrative business. Imagine it's a legal monopoly. You own that business. No one can compete with you in those cities. And you have fanatics. That's what fans comes from. Fanatics, fanatical customers who, when you charge more for the, inflation goes up and you pay $10 for a hot dog, people pay it. And they've been coming back for generations. It's an unbelievable business. A third opportunity real fast, bonds. Bonds have produced nothing up until this massive increase in the interest rates we've gone through that's been devastating for many banks that were holding on to bonds, right? Well, in 2021, people were so starving for income, from a bond that the junk bonds went crazy. There was this explosion in people buying junk bonds because they could make 3.9% instead of 1 or 2%. And this has taken big risk to make less than 4%. I was making 9% on private credit the entire time with less risk. And so private credit is because banks, you saw what happened in Silicon Valley, right? Banks are tightened up and they don't loan as much. So companies that are anywhere from 100 million to say 3 to 4 billion, there's 200,000 companies like that in the United States that are borrowing money all the time, and who they borrow from is private credit. But here's what's interesting. If you don't know private credit, I can give it to you in a metaphor. If you had a house right now and you got a mortgage rate at, say, 3% or 4%, whatever, back then, and it was fixed, you don't care that the interest rates went up. You're doing great. But if it's readjust, if it's a floating rate, you could be in trouble. Well, all these business loans are floating rate. So these private credit firms loan money at 5 and 6%. That's what business was borrowing at. And guess what? When the interest rates went up, they float with it. So now they're paying 11% plus. Well, it's the same loan, it's the same time period, but you just doubled or tripled, in some cases, your income stream when you own the private credit. Plus, I get the 2 and 20. So it's like,
right.
these are, you don't have to get rid of your bonds. These are a complement to your bonds, but they're 2 to 3 times higher returns. There's the energy industry. I might go on and on and on. So here's the most important part, though. The reason it's called the holy grail to investing is because I interviewed Ray Dalio, 10 years ago. Now we've become good friends over the years. And I asked him a simple question. I said, the most successful investor in history, his fund manages Bridgewater almost $200 billion in business. They do it for countries even. And I said, you've got the best track record out there. What is the single most important investment principle that any investor needs to know? He goes, Tony, you know the importance of diversification, but people think of that in general, don't put too many eggs in one basket. He said, I turned that into a science of saying, how do I get the asymmetric risk reward? How I have the least amount of risk and the most amount of upside. And he said, I found out it's simply this. He called it the holy grail. He goes, the holy grail of investing is to find 8 to 12 uncorrelated investments. Now, uncorrelated, just so everybody understands, stocks and bonds usually have been uncorrelated. The idea that people put you in like 60% stocks and 40% bonds is that, okay, when stocks go down, bonds will make up for it, or vice versa. Well, the only problem with that is during really rough times like 2020, they both went down equally. 2008, huge drops. And then your broker will tell you, gosh, no one could foresee this. It happens every time. You can foresee it.
Right.
So,
right.
But they don't foresee it is what they're really saying, right? So he said, look, you find 8 to 12 uncorrelated investments, you reduce your risk 80% and you increase your upside. You are protecting yourself while lowering your risk and increasing your return. So it's like taking those core 4 and putting them on steroids that I told you.
Yeah, you guys, here's the value of all of this. I want to just stamp this for a second too, okay? It's the holy grail of investing. You need to go get it or pre-order it now. It wasn't until I was worth 9 figures that I knew what private equity was. And then I remember the day I finally got involved in one, like you said, it was like waiting for the rope at the club, right?
Yeah.
And so I can just validate these things. It's public information that I was a part of the group trying to buy the Mets that we lost out to Cohen. I wanted to get involved in Major League Baseball. We were the runner-up to that group. Private real estate. I've even done some bridge loan investing stuff that's private as well. This is the first book, honestly, I've ever read that does let you peer into what the mega wealthy and mega successful are doing and gives you access to the information. I have literally never read a book like this before.
Yeah, I haven't.
And I can tell you that it took me till I have never. I'm grateful you wrote it. I'm grateful we're talking about it because I was 45 years old and worth multiple 9 figures before any of these things were even ever explained to me. And so if I could have known this earlier in my journey, you guys, it'd be a game changer. And just imagine this, just being armed with this knowledge, the confidence that it would give you that you can win in your life. And that's just part of the game. I think most of us feel like the game is kind of rigged against us. And to some extent, you're right. There's been lots of places you haven't had access to that this book will at least enlighten you as to where to go get that access and to have an education regarding it.
In private credit, do you know what their dropout ratio is of loans that go bad? Less than 1%. Any bank would die for that because they don't sell those loans.
The delinquency rate's 1%. That's awesome.
Their money is on the line. They don't sell the loans off. So they're very picky about who they pick. And they've got great leverage in terms of those relationships. And the other part you got to know is literally everything is moving towards alternative investments. If you don't know about these things, how are you ever going to take advantage? And then you think, like you said, the system's rigged against you. It is unless you educate yourself. If you educate yourself, I didn't learn about most of these things till I was 48 years old. And like you said, it's hard to get into some of these pieces to make happen. Now, this is the democratization of alternative investments. And here's the other problem you got to know. 1996, there are 8,000 stocks you could pick from in the US. There's only 3,600 now. If you look at the S&P, no, if you look at the Russell 2000, 40% of those firms are not profitable. 40% don't make money. So people are basically betting in these environments, hoping in these environments. So I love being side by side as a partner with some of the smartest people in the world. So for example, if you go to Robert Smith at Vista, he does SaaS, right? Software as a service. He has built a system so he can take any company on, give them the right coaching, knows what to do to grow them. It's like a cookie cutter. He grows them, expands them, sells them for huge profit, goes to the next one. These people in this area, what I love about it is they're adding value. It isn't just a hope and a bet. It's like, we're going to take this company on and we're going to find a way to make it better, stronger, more valuable. And then we're going to get a piece of that upside. That has been my whole philosophy in life, is do more for others than anybody else does. Add more value and you'll prosper. But you can't prosper if you're unaware of it. And by the way, the book, I don't know when people will be hearing this, but the book, February 13, gets released. But if you go pre-order it, and then you go to the Holy Grail of Investing.com, holygrailinvesting.com, there's a website there. And if you just give your digital receipt, I'll give you the first chapter today on audio that you can listen to immediately. And it already gives you some of the tools that'll blow your mind. So you don't have to wait.
It's very cool, you guys. And by the way, I know a lot of you, your only viewpoint of this kind of stuff is like Gordon Gekko from the days, and they destroy these companies. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's not how private equity works now. As Tony said, they're making these companies better, more profitable. They execute for the consumer better as well. Right. So everybody wins here for the most part. So let's shift gears, because we're going to run out of time, and I want to make sure that we get a chance to cover it. You said something earlier about, with the Russell 2000, 40% are not doing anything. They're losing money, and we're sort of hoping. That hope is not a strategy is something I learned from you many, many years ago regarding life as well. I think more than ever, Tony, people feel a sense of, because you and I are in the same world, we coach some of the same people, we have the same sorts of people come to our events. More than ever, I feel like people feel like they can't get control over their lives. And that's why the financial piece is so important. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are if you were to give somebody counsel first coming to this event, but where would they begin? Obviously, I know you talk a lot about mind and body. You talk about having role models that are important, but I kind of turn the floor over to you. Someone's listening. They're like, hey, man, I want to get control of my life. The money part, awesome. What about my life? What about my emotions? Yeah. What about my family? Yeah. What would you say to them?
I think the first thing you got to do is you got to create a compelling future. What I mean by that is anybody can deal with difficult today if they have a compelling tomorrow. Right now, there's so much fear in the world that people are afraid. I hear millennials talking about they don't want to have kids because they don't want to bring them this world that's such a terrible world. There's so much violence. There's less violence today in the world, even though we have this horrible war that's going on, 2 of them now. There's more than 2, but the 2 that most people are familiar with obviously what's happening over there in Russia and Ukraine, and also what's happening in Israel and Gaza. But we have less of that than we've ever had, even in the middle of this. But the fear is bigger. The promotion of it, the watching about it, the arguing about it, all that is enhanced by the way that we live today and the fears that are today. So what I tell people is you need to create a compelling future. You need to understand whether you're on the path or not. I mean, think about the hero's journey just for a second. What is the hero's journey? You're living your life over and over, and it's boring. You can pick any great story of humanity, all the same stories. They're all the hero's story at some level. And then something disrupts it. Something creates a challenge. It's the call to become more. It's the call to go on adventure. You might have lost your job. You may have lost money. You may have been told you got cancer. You might have gone through a divorce. We look at it as it's horrific experience, but I've experienced, I know you have as well, multiple experiences. Someone telling me, I've buried, 3 fathers and a mother. I've been in a place where they said, hey, you got a tumor in your brain. You may not survive. I've been in those moments that were scary as hell, but they were calls to be able to grow. And then you go on the journey, and as you go on the journey, it's amazing. When you commit to grow, when you commit to figure it out, you get yourself on that path. What's going to happen is you're going to meet mentors. You're going to meet people along the way that'll show up that can help you. And you're going to have to face your dragons. You're going to have to see what is it that is stopping you. So I look at it this way. The first step, if you want to make your relationship better or your business better or your emotion, anything that you value, your finances better, the first step to being on the path, am I on the path or not? Like the first one is, do you know what you really want? As simplistic as that is. Most people know what they don't want. And so where focus goes, energy flows. So the first step is like, what do I really want? Why do I want it? Because the why is even more important than what. It's like New Year's, right? People set their goals or their New Year's resolutions, and by February, they're gone, right? They're already broken them because they just were expressing what they wanted, not why they wanted. They didn't get enough reasons to push themselves through, and it was difficult, and they didn't have a good plan. So the first thing is, what I want, why do I want it? Who do I got to become to make that happen? And you get crystal clear. Now you're on the path. What's the second step of the path? Now you got to be honest. You got to get to the truth and tell yourself the truth about the gap. Because all of us have a gap between where we are and where we want to be. And if you want to close that gap quickly, the only way to do it is to be honest. The truth sets you free. So you get clear, where am I really compared to where I want to be and why? What's prevented me in the past from losing that weight, from making that money, from having a relationship last, from growing that business? And there's only a few things that prevent you. It's fear. It's, and there's all kinds of fears, but fear. It's limiting beliefs. Well, I've never done it before. I don't know what to do. I'm not that kind of person. I don't know numbers. All my relationships end up. All the good ones are gone. Whatever the belief is, there's a limiting belief, there's a fear, or there's some other primary emotion in the way, or it's a habit, or the fifth one is you're missing a skill. Like learning to invest is a skill. If you don't take the time to learn it, you're going to be in pain, right? Because you're going to always be trying to earn it. And most people think, well, I'll make so much money that I'll never have to worry about it when I hit the big thing. Well, the people that hit the big thing, the athletes, the entertainers, usually are broke 20 years later. You've seen it over and over and over again because they made the big dollars, they have the big overhead, but they never learned how to make money while they sleep. They never learned to be an owner, right? An investor. They just made income, and no income is enough. Mike Tyson's a friend of mine. Mike made $1 billion over his career, just short of $1 billion, and lost it all. You know, I can give you 50 Cent. 50 Cent made all this money. He bought Mike's house, and then he went broke. To give you an idea. You know, Elton John overspent and lost all the money he had. And unfortunately, he made it back eventually to make that happen. I mean, that is not the solution that you need. So if you really want to transform, you get on the path, figure out what's missing. Then what do? Now you come up with a quick plan, not a perfect plan, but a quick plan to attack it with massive action. And then what do? Now you got to face your dragons. You got to make the changes that are necessary. Then you have some daily practices. There's like 7 steps to this. You measure and you celebrate and you begin again. So I teach people the exact path. And if you're not on the path, it's scary. If you're not on the path to financial security or freedom, it's scary. If you're not on the path to quality relationship, or you're on a path right now that's leading to pain, you better educate yourself, but you got to start with what you want and why you want it. Then you got to see what's wrong with you, not your partner. What's the challenge? What's the habit? What's the emotion? What's the triggers? Got to take a little action plan. You got to make the changes. And this process, the hero's journey is you go on the journey, you become more by facing these challenges, you learn and you grow, and then you bring that back home and you experience, the rewards of being the hero in your own life. And that's in essence what people need to be able to do. And it's not that hard because there's patterns. There's certain patterns that work. I don't care what the color of your skin is, how old you are or young you are. I don't care what your nationality is. I don't care what gender you are or your sexual preference. These are the laws of life. If you understand the laws and you align with them, you do well. So one of the reasons we do this 3-day process is in 3 days for just 2.5, 3 hours a day, people are able to get clear what they want exactly in each of these areas. They get clear what's gotten in the way. They come up with their plan. They start to face their demons and they move the ball forward. And that's how you get the kind of results that we've seen people get that are just mind-boggling. The people that just came and spent 3 days with us. And if they want to go deeper, they can go to some other event, but we don't hold it back. It's not partially free. It's totally free. And I encourage people not only come and do this because it's January 25th through the 27th. It's right around the time your New Year's resolutions you had them are probably going out the window. And you can do it with your friends, or you can do it with your family together. You can do it from home. You don't have to travel. You don't have an expense. Or you go to the office and do it with a group of your friends at the office type of thing. But I promise you it'll be an experience you won't forget. So you just, if you get yourself in immersion, that's how it changes. The problem is people try to do a little bit at a time. It's like trying to learn a language a little bit at a time. People that learn language in high school and college usually don't speak it 10 years later. But if I dumped you in Italy with no teacher and said, I'm picking you up in 90 days, because you're seeing it, breathing it, being around all day long in immersion, you learn the language.
Last question. By the way, thank you for today. We've certainly maxed out the hour. We're a little bit over on an hour, but people get a chance to hear you, hear the two of us together, and this thing just explodes every single time. Hard question. So, and dig deep on this one for me. So you have a precious new little girl. I guess she's getting older now, but every time we talk, I keep saying this precious new baby, but she's actually older now. And my son, Max, is a college golfer, and he's a really good golfer. He's probably going to go play it professionally. And this weekend, I was watching Tiger and his son play in that the parent-child tournament on on TV this weekend. And I was thinking his son has such an advantage because his dad's Tiger Woods. I mean, it's a pretty good model and mentor for your golf swinger, how to chip, how to putt, how to hit a driver. And I was thinking it kind of sucks that for Max that I'm his dad because I have literally nothing to offer him except how to do these things wrong on the golf course. So literally today, no joke, Tony, today I'm like, who's the best golf instructor in the world? Turns out the dude follows me. And I reach out to the guy. I said, I'd like to hire you to coach my son. He basically says, no, I only work with PGA Tour players. But if you'll coach me, I'll trade you for lessons. The point that I'm making to you is it's awesome to have a coach that's the best in the world that you can model. Tiger's got that with his son. And your daughter, to some extent, will have that with you in terms of life strategy. And so I'm just curious. I asked you this kind of last time, and I said, what would you wish for her? And you said, I'd wish love. But your daughter's going to grow up in a world that is this AI world, that you and I didn't grow up in. And it's going to be all this new frontier. There's this new technological revolution that we're now in the middle of. She's going to live probably a lot longer than you and I will, right? She's going to have a totally different world geopolitically to some extent than you and I did. So the challenges of life for this young girl, when she becomes a young woman out in the world, are going to be unique. And so you're the Tiger Woods of life and bliss strategy. Let's call you that right now. What are there a few things you would wish that she was equipped with when she leaves your home with you and Sage someday? She goes out into the world and you said, I want her armed and equipped with this. For Tiger, it's for his son in golf, it's how to chip or putt or how to hit a cut or a draw on the golf course. But in the game of life, I'm curious as to what you would want her equipped with when she someday, unfortunately, leaves your home and goes out into the world. What would you want her to take with her?
I put a lot of thought into that. Obviously, I have 5 kids and 5 grandkids, and I have a daughter that's 48, as I said, and a daughter that's 2.5. So I have quite a range. My daughter is, my grandkids are all older than my daughter, and she's their, aunt. So it's kind of interesting. But the answer to your question is, number one, is I want her to have a philosophy of life that will guarantee happiness. And there's only one that I know of, and that is life is about growth and giving. And so even at 2.5, she has responsibilities in the house as part of this family. She cleans her own table. She takes her fork and her stuff. She brings it in. When we, at the end of the night, and we do all our vitamins, we give them one for everybody. And then she goes and shares them, and she gives other people theirs first, then hers, right? Life is about people. The biggest challenge for people are unfulfilled is they think life's about me when it's really about we. There's only so much joy you can experience in your own body through anything, massive success, acknowledgement from others, I don't know, sex, music, rock and roll, doesn't matter. By yourself, It's only so much. When you have a great experience in life, the first thing you want to do is share with somebody you love, right? So it's really, life is calling us to grow, because when we grow, we have something to give. And so she's learning Chinese right now, Spanish and English. And we were at a table last week, and there was a person who speaks Chinese person, and she was talking back and forth between us in English. And I know some of those Chinese words and some of those Spanish words, not as much as she knows already at 2.5. She's doing algebra right now. I started her when she was a little baby. She's swimming right now. She has plenty of time just to be, though. And I want for her autonomy. I want her, everything we do with her, we don't tell her what to do. We give her choices. You want to do this or that, and she gets to choose, and some of them have consequences, but she gets to choose. She always knows there's a choice. People always tell me, I'm stuck. It's the only thing I can do is this. That's bullshit. And one choice is no choice. 2 choices is the dilemma. My belief is there's always at least 3 choices. You may not like them all, but there's at least 3 choices. And once you find 3, there's 4 or 5 to get to where you want to go. So I'm teaching her at 2.5 to make choices. The choices have consequences. Their life's about growing and giving. And I'm helping her to also recognize those patterns. At this stage, kids are so great at patterns. So I want her to own the identity that I'm great at learning. Because for AI, for everything that's coming, you need to become learning more rapidly. And that's pattern recognition, pattern utilization, and pattern creation. So, she's playing the piano. I never got to have these choices. So she has all these choices, but also I make sure she's not going from one class to the next class to the next class. She has time outside to just be and play and take in nature and be around. I want her to have her own autonomy, her own sovereignty, so that she's not influenced by what everybody else thinks. That's also why she won't be on social media for a very, very, very long time, right? So those are, as long as I can control it, it'll be a long time. It'll be selective what she does. So she also, though, has modeled her family. Like, it's no bullshit. It's like my wife and I are so head over heels in love. We've been together 25 years now, quarter of a century, so It's like, there's no fights here. I want everything that makes my wife happy. She wants everything that makes me happy. So she sees this environment of such love. Plus, we have so many close friends that are chosen family for us, so she models that. She doesn't know anything different. Now she's going to go in a world that's not like that, but she's going to have attachment strategies that are totally secure. So she's not going to be one of those people pushing it away or starving for someone else's external affection. So that's my goals. I want her to have those pieces. I want her to have choice, autonomy. I want her, the philosophy of life is, what are you here to give, not what are you here to get? And she's already learning that at 2.5, and we're only going to do more. Plus, it's not just me. My wife is unbelievable. She's the greatest mom. And we couldn't have a baby. We went through IVF for 7 years, 3 times a year, holding my wife's hand. We'd go through that horrible surgery. And finally, and I kept saying, honey, we got to have a baby before I'm 50. I don't want to go to my child's high school reunion at 70. Well, now I'm going to go there when I'm 80. high school graduation, I should say. And but I'm at a different prime of life. I'm so glad that I know what I have and I can share what I can with her. But those are my core answers. I'm always looking for new things, and my wife is doing the same. But we want her to have joy and happiness. And, only one thing that makes you happy: progress. When we grow, we feel alive. If you get a gift, you get a goal, you achieved your ultimate goal, you have 1 of 2 reactions. After you get it, is this all there is, which is the horrible reaction, or wow, this is so awesome. But how long do you keep the happiness about achieving that goal? A year? 6 years? No. 6 months? 6 weeks? 6 hours? 6 days? Most people, somewhere between 6 hours and 6 weeks is the most they stay happy, because we're not supposed to stay happy. Life has made us want to keep growing. Now, so when you make progress, though, you make significant progress in your body, in your relationship, in your finance, you're not there yet. You lose the first 10 pounds. Oh, you figure out how to invest, and now you got something to bring you a great income and equity. Wow. There's an excitement with progress that doesn't go away. So I always tell people, progress is everything. How are you going to keep making progress? That's what's going to make you feel alive. The people you see that had all the money and all the affection and all the everything around them that people think they want, these movie stars, comedians, whoever, and take their own life. Why? In every case, if you do your homework, you can see they stopped growing. They didn't feel fully alive anymore. They got rote in what they're doing. And it became all about me, or they got into drugs and alcohol, and then one day, in a really bad state, did something really stupid. So I can't control what my daughter will be like, and I don't have that delusion or illusion. But I can do the best I can to give her an incredible base to make those choices from. And that's what I'm committed to. And so is my wife. And as I started to say, she has a second mom, because the lady who carried for us has been a dear friend of ours, chosen family for more than a decade, Mary. And so we said, Mary, you should stay with us and do this. You've helped bring her in the world. So she literally has like 2 moms and me,
So great.
and all these resources. I think she's going to do okay.
So, hey guys, as you know, I've partnered up with my good friend Brennan Burchard, who's created the greatest personal development system that has ever been designed, called Growth Day. If you go to growthday.com/ed, you can get all the information. But it's that time of year where everybody's trying to form new habits. They've got new resolutions and goals, and you need an environment, and you need some coaches, and you need to be able to do it super inexpensively. And that's where growthday.com/ed comes in. There's everything from journaling to accountability programs, live messages every Monday from myself and other influencers. There's an opportunity for you to get courses that would cost thousands of dollars completely for free. It's incredible. Go to growthday.com/ed and check it out.
Speaking of crisis, we're in one sort of as a world right now. And there's a lot of people, probably more than ever. Someone's coming to my show today with you and I, going through probably some sort of a crisis. It could be, this is during COVID. If you watch this 3 years from now, hopefully you don't even remember what that was. That's what we're hoping. But if you're seeing it when it's released, we're in the middle of still of COVID-19. And for a lot of people, this has been a crisis situation they didn't see coming. They've lost their jobs, 40 million people just in the United States, but worldwide, hundreds of millions of people are out of work. Maybe money they've saved for the last 5, 6, 7 years is gone. Maybe a fitness, amount of weight they've lost. They haven't been to a gym in 8, 10, 12 weeks, and that's gone. Relationships strained because they're in the same house together. This is sort of a crisis time. Anything you'd share with people to thrive or cope or thrive during this time that's been working for you?
Yeah, I will. And, first off, I acknowledge the hardship. So a little advice on how to thrive is not to go into denial, like it's all great, isn't it? Well, I'm a Prozac right now. No, so for me, my mantra, because I had some major things shift and in my business and life, like all comedy shows for the foreseeable future canceled. And I know that's a 1/1,000,000th of what a lot of people are going through. Yet my mantra I adopted right away was two things. One was the mindset of this is either an opportunity or a catastrophe. I'm going to get what I'm looking for. Wise man named Dan Sullivan has said, the eyes can only see and the ears can only hear what the mind's looking for. So I'm going to look for the opportunity. Yeah, there's things going on I don't like, and I'm going to look for the opportunity. So the second piece of the mindset is more the action-oriented one, where I've done my best, and I encourage people to take this if it works for you. Have the mindset of surrendering to what I can't control and taking bold action on what I can control. I can't control all of California is shut down. I can't control how much of the rest of the country is shut down, but I can take bold action on what I can control. And I'll tell you, at least for me, and I'm guessing some other people are part of the human condition with me, so they might be able to feel this. If I wasn't taking bold action on what I can control, I would have gone nuts. I just guarantee it. It's like the life energy that wants to live through us. If you don't give it an outlet, it fries us. We get depressed, anxious, we feel purposeless. Yet taking bold action on what we can control, especially bold action on things that feel purposeful to us, man, I think that's a recipe for fulfillment. And I think that's a mindset that a lot of people can be served with during a weird time.
So first off, I really believe whatever it takes for you. Before I thought what Munger and Buffett did was so good. I love those two guys.
Yeah, they're awesome.
But before we get that, like whatever it takes, I'm just going to share. If you take nothing else from this podcast today, take this. Whatever it takes. If it's listening to Ed Mylett's book or Tony Robbins or something from yourself or something else, if there's something you read, if you pray, if you talk to God, if you go to church, it's different from everybody. But whatever it takes to keep you in a space of, I'm going to live into my inner purpose. I'm going to tap into my full potential rather than playing small and playing scared. You figure out, this isn't a show about personal development. You can read Ed's book and lots of other things, but do something to keep you focusing on where you can go and not sit on your hands. I was with Tom Bilyeu 2 weeks ago, and he said, during times like this, people talk about fight or flight. He goes, that's not what happens here. It's the third F. They all freeze.
So true.
And I was like, wow, I got goosebumps. I was like, that's right. So unfreeze yourself, whatever it takes. Secondly,
very good. By the way. Very good.
So the second thing, once you start realizing that we're not giving you that answer today, I'm saying go find that answer. But the other thing, I love what Buffett said. He said, during a recession, during inflation, invest in yourself. Get better at what you decide to do than anybody else. Because if it's, he said, Reichmarks or seashells, you'll just get more of the pie. So if it's a deflated dollar, when you used to get 2, go get 6 because you're better at what you do.
So true.
I know it sounds so simple, but it's like, duh.
It doesn't.
Let me stop staring at the competition. Let me stop talking to my friends about how things go bad. You know, the conversation at your dinner tables are getting different. Be the only one that's saying, no, I'm going to find the gold in this downtime.
Can I say something on that as well?
Yeah.
I want to play off that with you. I'm big on this quote of separation season, where I'll say, hey, it's the summertime. Everyone's flinching. This is where you hit the accelerator because you don't catch people in front of you when they're at full speed. It's harder. You can, but it's harder. You catch them when they flinch, they relax, they freeze.
Yep.
And there's seasons. And usually it's seasonal, meaning like, okay, August, right? People start to freeze, or July, they're gone, they're flinching. Or Christmas time, everyone takes time off. Then there are economic cycles that are separation seasons. And I think that's where we are now. They're going to freeze, they're going to panic, they're going to buy into the collective group think of the world, which is this isn't the time to accelerate. This isn't the time to do it. And when they're going that way, you go the other way. The other thing that happens during these times, if you find your lane, you and I have both built tremendous wealth buying assets in those times that were massively on sale. And so you have the accelerator of both your brand, your business doing well, and you acquiring things at super discounted prices potentially. So you have this double multiplier whammy.
Okay, so let me ask you something. You have had so much incredible success. If we laugh at each other, where we came from, similar backgrounds.
Very similar. Right? Dads, everything.
But at this point, I feel beyond blessed with the success I've had. I know you do too.
Yes.
And amazing that the interview you just did. I hope it's your I hope the interview before me is your #1 interview in history, right?
Thank you.
But I have a desire to work even harder right now because I know the opportunities that are coming. It's a mental, like I wish I could give it to everyone. Like, I'm like, how do I grind? How do I make another X, Y, and Z? Because I know that everything is on sale and everything's going to be even more deeply discounted. So whatever it takes to motivate you when everybody's sitting down, freezing, having negative conversations, you should be investigating, look where the puck is going, say, how do I accumulate more cash so I can buy things at a discount? Because when it shifts, that multiplier is unlike anything you could imagine.
100%.
You go from doing okay to when people say, how you doing? You get that smile of like, I'm doing okay.
What's that look like for you right now? Like, do you read certain things? Do you journal? Are you visualizing? Are you looking for problems to solve? Like, what's that look like for you?
All the above.
Okay.
I've been geeking out on books, different books than I ever had before. Because listen, we all like to learn, right? And we all grow. I'm keeping my mindset super strong, but I think the opportunities are going to come so strong, and we have to be mentally prepared.
I think in times like these, you do need to invest in yourself and grow yourself. If you'd have told me back in 1987 or whenever the heck it was that I got my personal power tapes and I read Unlimited Power by Awaken the Giant with Win and Tony's books, if you'd have told me someone like Dean Graziosi or Tony Robbins would give me their time for free where I can learn from them, I'd have thought you were absolutely out of your damn mind. And so a couple things that I think you have to do during this window is you got to invest in yourself. And if you can surround and change your peer group instantly with the best in the world, you should do it. You and I were talking off camera. You and I are working on right now, me and you, to spend a full day together to strategize about our lives and our businesses. There's a bunch of things that I want to learn from you that you and I have talked about. And so if someone can actually get that time with you for free and with Tony Robbins, that is a monster win. The other thing I'll say is this. Great people want to accept challenges. Great people want to be challenged even in their most difficult times. In fact, at this stage of my life, one of the frustrating things for me, Dean, is that, it is a smaller circle. There's very few people who challenge me. So I love when I work out with a training partner and they challenge me. Man, 3 more. I'm like, all right, you did 3 more. I'm doing 1 more, the power of 1 more, right? To be challenged. So what you're doing with this challenge, just tell us what it is and how they go get part of the challenge. Because at a minimum, what they're going to get, this is what I'm fired up about. They're going to get fed.
Yeah.
They're
going to get when you need it.
It's amazing to me that in this day and age, you can get access. People pay a guy like Robbins millions and millions and millions of dollars to be coached to get a session. They pay me this. They pay you this. Yeah. Yet the everyday person right now that's out there every day trying to change their life can get access to this stuff for nothing initially. So tell us about it.
So we launched about 4 years ago to let everybody know, and it was the biggest online event in history. We had 250,000 people show up. Unbelievable, and it started a movement. This year, we're doing the Time to Thrive Challenge. And I'll tell you what that is. This is probably the last year we're doing it because it is a lot of work. Yeah. It is 5 days with Tony and I, about 2 to 3 hours a day. I'd like to say 90 minutes, but Tony goes long. Mm-hmm. We have amazing guests like our friend Jenna Kutcher and Brendan Burchard and other amazing, even Matthew McConaughey's coming because he wrote Green Lights. So over 5 days, we're doing a Time to Thrive. We're calling it Time to Thrive because it's not a time to sit on your hands. It's not a time to freeze. It's time to thrive. We're calling it a challenge because we're challenging people to take action, challenging them to think differently, challenging them to play full out and see for themselves that they could be a part of this industry. And it's happening on August 2nd. And over 5 days, literally show people how to be in this industry. And it's not kind of free, it's completely free. And if you know Tony, which you do, you guys are friends, you've done you've done podcasts and you've had deep conversations. Last year, Tony said, if we're going to go out with a bang, let's go 5 days. And let's deliver value in a time when people need it. So what I challenge you to do is just come to the challenge. Hang out with us for 5 days and see if this is for you.
How do they get there?
Thrive215.com. Okay. My team just sent me the URL. It's Thrive, THRIVE, 215.com. Register for free, not kind of free. It's totally free. But here's what I'd encourage you to do. Don't dabble. Sometimes when it's free, people, it's like, it's free. Maybe I'll go. Like, pretend you paid $5,000. You just said this. I'm not saying. 2 weeks ago on a Saturday, I spent 1 full day with a guy in his company, paid me $250,000 for the day. right? I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just giving you a point of reference.
Yep.
Tony's got a waiting list of people who want to give him $1 million a year to be his coach.
Yep.
This is free, and it is designed for those to thrive in this shifting world.
Okay, Thrive215.com. Okay, so guys, go. Why do you think people are that way about themselves? Let's shift a little bit and stay on this topic, though. What is it about most of us that makes us think we're not worthy of being successful? Because it ties into this, right? I mean, if we can unpack that, I'm going to go do this. If I don't unpack that, maybe I don't. I've been struck all my life by people that just, like in my case, I'm critical of myself. I'm hard on myself, but I've never had this belief like I don't deserve to win. I may not thought I could.
Right.
I don't know how I'm going to, but I've not had it so all the way back there. I'm like, I just don't deserve to win. Or someone like me can't win. I've not ever had that. I've had all the other stuff. But what is it?
Wow, that's such a good. As you say that, I've never felt that either. I always felt the cards might be stacked against me. This one's going to be rough. Not sure I can get through it.
Me too.
I've had sleepless nights. A lot of them. I've gone 6 months with sleeping 2-3 hours a night because I'm stressed, and my wake up and my brain's thinking. I like to share that with people because I think when they see success, they think, man, that was just probably a harmonious ride for you, right?
Yeah, right.
I went through a divorce in the middle of it. Like I've been through a lot of the things on the opposite side, right?
But you've also worked with millions of people, and you know that a lot of them suffer from this.
Yeah, they do. But you just said that. I've never felt I didn't deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say I think it's society, and especially we live in a society right now where when you're successful, there's a lot of people that look at it as a negative, right? So we almost have this negative association to sales. Mm-hmm. We have a negative association to success. Mm. But here's the last thing I'll say about it. I said this one time on stage randomly, and the audience went nuts, but I just said, when it comes to money and success, it's like you're at a therapist, money's on one chair, you're on the other, the therapist is in the middle, and you go, I hate that money. If I get that money, I might change. I might be a horrible person. Mm-hmm. And then in the other part, you're like, but I need that money so I can have freedom and take care of my family, and I need control, and I don't want to work in this horrible job anymore. Mm-hmm. Could you imagine a therapist saying, well, we got to get this straight. Do you hate money in that chair, or do you love money? I'm really unsure. And I think that's the conflict. Mm-hmm. I think the conflict is I think money and alcohol just expose and compound who you are. Mm-hmm. You're a jerk sober, you're a real jerk drunk, right? You're violent sober, you're very violent, right? Same with money. And I think if you're listening to Ed Mylett, you have to realize that money is a byproduct of service. And what money can do is, listen, when people say to me, money doesn't buy happiness, I say, you haven't given enough away. Right. So true. When I was on your stage, I was compelled. I was compelled by you. I watched your emotions behind camera when you were talking about the families in Texas. I was compelled. Do you know how great you're thanking me? Why? Like, you're thanking me for something that filled my heart. You know how great, you know what $50,000 was to me at 18? I thought if I could make that a year, I'd be the richest man alive. Yes. And to be able to sit on stage and say, hey, Ed, let me give you another 50 grand. Yeah. But at the same time, I built 2 schools in Africa. I fed 7 million people, right? I donated $600,000 last year to Operation Underground Railroad. Mm. How blessed are we that we get to do those things, right? Yeah. So I don't know. Earlier I said, Tony, I like when he says get leverage. I said, get in the right mindset. If you feel that being successful, that you don't deserve it, or that money is bad, I'm going to tell you to dig into that. Find out where that is. Ask yourself. One of the simplest ways I always do is ask yourself why 7 times. Why do I think I don't deserve it? I'm not that smart. Well, why do I think not being smart has anything to do with being successful? And just keep asking why over and over again. And you'll get to a point where you'll start getting emotional and be like, everything I just shared is
really, really good. Because it's a story you're the best at talking about the story we tell ourselves. Let's stay on this just for a second, because I feel like all of this is tied together in order to participate in the challenge. And I also, every week, I want people on here to change their life every single week. It's why I do the show. Like I said, there's only been 2 humans come back here 3 times, you and Dr. Joe Dispenza. And because I just think that you work on this story thing so well with people. So I have this new show, as you know, coming out. I can't say a lot about it, but I can't wait. It's a show where I intervene in people's lives. It'll be out the end of August, beginning of September. And one of the ladies on the show had gained a bunch of weight, like 180 pounds, and then had lost like 90 of it, gained it back, and did that a couple times. And in the middle of it, I said, why do you have all this weight on your body? And I said, there's 2 things. I said, one, you have the identity. She adopted the identity of a heavy person who happened to have lost weight. Ooh. And in that case, she's going to get back to that identity. Yeah. So she was a heavy person who lost weight. I said, I won't say her name, but I said, we have to adopt that you're a healthy, beautiful, vibrant woman who's gained weight.
Yeah,
And if
what
we
a
can
great
switch this identity, switch
like
that
you did in
narrative.
chapter 2, I think you're about the thermostat,
The
right? That's the
thermostat,
same
exactly,
thing.
same
You
thing.
shifted a certain
Right.
thermostat.
Shifting this story. And then later I said, listen, we don't do anything in our life that there's not some benefit for, even if the majority of it is detrimental. So this story you're all telling yourself, those of you that suffer from it, you don't deserve it. You're doing that for a reason that you get something for doing it.
True
And in
story.
her case, she said, I think I hide in my weight. That as I start to lose the weight, maybe people are going to see other things in me that I don't think
Wow.
I can handle. And it was really this very emotional breakthrough. I want people to watch the show, so I'm not going to get into it. There's 10 of them, but what about that? That this story we tell ourselves, Dean, even though it may not serve us, there's some service in it that we can hide in it.
Yeah.
That it masks other things in our lives. And I think for everyone listening to this right now, this could be the breakthrough moment of your life as we just talk about this concept. This thing you keep telling you about you that holds you back from jumping into a challenge, holds you back from starting a business, holds you back from getting into that relationship or getting fit like you know you should or asking yourself the right questions. You're getting something from it. Even if most of it's negative for you. How does one, just in general, start to change the story they tell themselves about their life? Because you're the master at this.
Yeah, well, you know, and I know if you're listening to Ed Mylett, you've heard this before, you've other people talk about it, but I think maybe this is the first time you get to really feel it, or maybe this silly version that I'm going to give you sticks with you. And if this is why you're here today, this is why you're here. Here's the way I look at it. We need pain sometimes to disconnect from a story. You know, somebody asked me about success once, and I would love to say I was always aspirational. I wanted more. I didn't want to be like my dad and struggle and be like my mom who worked 3 jobs to make $90. And I had this vision of something bigger and better and being in control of my life. And all those things sound good at this phase. Sometimes you got to go to the dark side.
Yes.
I just didn't want to be them. My father was miserable and fought with everyone, and he'd be in love for 6 months and be divorced within 3 and always mad. And sometimes you got to give yourself permission. When I went in my toughest thing, when I needed the extra boost, the turbo boost to get off the ground, I'm like, you're going to end up like your dad. You're going to end up broke. You're going to end up alone. You're going to end up not in control of your life. Someone else is going to tell you how to raise your kids and how to dress and when to go to work. I would push myself. So sometimes you got to go to the dark side to get the momentum. And I'm telling you to use that to shift your story.
Very good.
Right? So I'm Tony always says to get the rocket off the ground, all the energy's in the first couple of feet. And then once it gets in space, you hit the button, you're 1,000 miles an hour, right?
Yeah.
Do whatever it takes to get the rocket off the ground, to start the new business, to say I'm worthy, to shift the story. If it's pain that'll drive you, then use the pain, because half of us run away from pain, half of us run towards pleasure. We know that.
Yep.
Use the one that you're accustomed to and amplify it.
My gosh, that's profound.
So amplify the pain.
Yep.
Most people, Joe Dispenza would probably tell you not to do that, and I love that guy, and I'm glad you had him 3 times. But I needed that. Secondly, you know the story. If you think back, I could have made it, or I would do it, that's how you find this. The number one thing. I don't have the money. I don't have the time. My family thinks I'm nuts. I could never do something like this. I'm an introvert. I don't have a following. I don't know what that is. But here's the way I look at it. If you spend enough time today, and this is my quick hack on stories. If you spend enough time today, you can find the one thing. There's lots of them, but you can find the one that's probably held you back the most. So the 2 things I would say is go look at what it's already cost you. Again, this is personal development 101. I don't want to act like I made this up, but I want to remind you today. We all need reminder services. This story, this thing, this too young, too old, not money, it's already cost you pain. You already missed opportunities. You already let the ship go down the track, the train go down the tracks. You didn't start the business. You didn't go for the relationship. You didn't fix that thing, and it's already cost you a lot. So what I say, here's a cool way to look at it. It'd be like 2 armies. You already know the story that will come up when you decide to go all in. When you say, I don't care about it. I'm starting the business. I'm scaling the business. I'm not going to. You already know the army that's coming. You already know the story that's going to go, Ed, little Eddie, come on, Ed, you know where you came, you know what your house looked like when you were little, you weren't that good in school, you cheated in 9th grade, you cheated your way through, I'm making this up, Ed. I'm just saying.
Close.
But it's
biology.
Yeah. Accounting. So if you use the dark or the light, whatever you need to get the engine going. If you identify the story that's already cost you and you really think about it, it becomes painful. But here's the thing. As you think about this next thing you want to do, you want to thrive in a shifting economy. If that story's coming, it's like you're going to war, but the scout went out and you know that the other army is 2 days away.
Yeah.
You know what kind of guns they have. You know what kind of horses you have. You already know, here's the thing. You already know your enemy.
Yeah.
So if you're not preparing and fortifying and creating the things that block the enemy, then you're kind of inviting the story back. So you could be, you know, how many Uber drivers have you had? I haven't been in Uber in a while, but before COVID, when you were in Uber, how many Uber drivers did you say, oh man, I was on my way, Dean. I love your books. In 07, when the market shifted, I lost my business. I'm just said, the hell with it. You know how many of those stories I've heard?
Me too.
What they've done is they let that army come in, that story come in, because at least they have something.
Yep.
And what I want to tell you is, if you really want more, you know your enemy. The number one enemy is that story that's held you back. You can fortify the gates. You can decide to turn that story around, and you cannot let it in.
Yeah. By the way, let's stay on this, everyone. This is like kind of breakthrough stuff, even though I want you to hear me on this. There's a lot of talk in personal development about breaking patterns. I talk about it all the time. You do. Tony does. There's also a lot of power in leveraging them. And this idea, there's two things that are going to move every human being. Dean's told you. It's either to avoid pain, moving from pain, or to gain pleasure.
Absolutely.
And usually most human beings, I think in general, pain avoidance is the stronger of the mechanism, but it works for both people. You need to know which one moves you. So you've already said yours is pain avoidance.
Yep.
Right? So is mine. The truth is, I've become a pretty big dreamer, visionary guy, but I wasn't.
Yeah, it took me a long time to get there.
Long time to get there. And the fact is, I only really got really good at that after certain dreams were achieved. But why? I had to figure out which one moves me more. Okay? Avoiding pain moves me more, even to this day. Why? It's more familiar to me.
Yep.
I grew up in pain. So go take a look at the video of your life. Did you grow up in a really beautiful environment with lots of love and dreams and bliss and all this great stuff? Maybe your mover is more dreams and bliss. If you grew up in some pain, chaos, angst, fear, anxiety, stress, that's probably your pattern. And instead of trying to spend all your life breaking that pattern, there's parts of it you need to break, your behavior from it. But the mechanism itself for change for me is pain. And pain avoidance. I'm familiar with lots of pain. And so to this day, why do I prepare for speeches or podcasts or things so bad? Is it because I want the pleasure of a great podcast? Yeah, that's there.
No, you don't want to screw up?
I don't want to screw up.
Yeah.
I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want it not to be good. Why do I work so hard? Is to make difference in the world, obviously.
Okay, so I don't think anybody listening would know the kind of work you put in, Ed. Seriously,
or you either.
I don't think they know that you started at 3:30, going to do 4 podcasts today. You're going to jump. You're going to go take a suit. You're going to go do an event tonight. You're going to get up in the morning, fly someplace. I don't think anybody would realize that. Are you doing that because you want to sell more books, or are you doing it because you don't want to sell just one?
I'm doing it because I don't want to just sell one.
Right.
I'm doing
it. Now you've evolved because you know every time a book gets in someone's hand, you get to change their lives.
I do.
Right?
So you just nailed it. I was just going to say the other part of it is impact for me.
Right. So you know the impact.
Yep.
But you're not saying, but I know for a fact you're getting up tomorrow morning subconsciously.
Yes.
Not saying I'm getting up tomorrow because I don't want to. You're getting up subconsciously because you don't want to fail. Because that pain hurts.
It's a major.
And everybody told us we weren't going to make it, and our parents probably thought we weren't going to make it, and all that kind of stuff.
It's a major driver. And by the way, my impact. Stay with me on this because I know you're this way too because you grew up in pain. The impact I make still comes from pain. Meaning this. I know so many people are in pain, and because I connect with their pain, their lack of belief in themselves, they're feeling invisible, they're hurting right now, they want to be happier. That connection of pain is still the impact I want to make. So a lot of it is connected somehow to pain in my life, and it is for you too. It's like one is avoiding the pain of failing or not being successful or not ending up in heaven, which is that picture of who I'm capable of becoming. Like, do I really want to just get to heaven, or is it the pain of not becoming that man? It's both. But also even the impact part where I go, I want to make an impact in people's lives is because I connect with pain. I connect with the discomfort.
And you want to get it out of them.
I want to get it out of them.
Yeah.
So that's a major driver for me is pain. And I know my map and I know my pattern. And that's why so many athletes, by the way, when their career's over, they have a very difficult time. One, their identity was tied to their athleticism, but also there's no pain to avoid anymore. Now they're getting pat on the back. You were great. I loved your games. There's no pain to avoid. There's nothing to fill. So I got to think you're that way too.
I am. And the only reason I share that is because I hope you don't use pain to be successful for the rest of your life. but you can use it as that launching pad.
Yeah, it's a leverage.
And you can use it as a launching pad to start the business, to show up for the challenge, to play full out, to do something uncomfortable, right? The term I've been using since COVID is we all need to take more uncomfortable action.
Did it surprise you that I said I don't want to just sell one book, or did you think that's what I was going to say?
I knew that's what you were going to say.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's me, right? I play like I'm 10 points down. Tony and I are doing this challenge, right? We're going to put 1 million people in it. That's the goal. Last year we put 900,000 in, right?
Crazy.
And it changed 1 million people's lives, right? This year, I attack this, Ed, as if 2 people are going to show up, because I know if you show up, I know the end result. I saw hundreds of thousands of comments a day of like, oh my God, I didn't know it was going to be like this. Oh my God, I love you, Tony. I love you, Dean. I love you. Thank you. And you know that driver, just like I see the comments coming in for your book. You want to sell another 200,000 copies in the next 2 weeks so you can help people. I will play like I'm 10 points down through this entire challenge. I will rehearse. I've already watched the last 2 years that we did this. I watched what Tony did. I watched what I did. He's doing the same thing. We're prepping. If people are going to show up, even though we want to deliver something that's transformational, but I'm going to look through the lens of not wanting to fail still, because I'm avoiding the pain of it not working at the level of the impact that I want to make. Right. And I know we went down a couple different rabbit holes, but I just want to give people permission today, heading into a recession, heading into a shifting world. Again, I hope it doesn't, but it looks like an economic winter is here. I'm going to tell you, use whatever leverage you can use to move. Just move in a direction, investigate, look where the puck is going, look for something different, explore, question every story that comes into your head. Know your enemy, that story that's already screwed you over and cost you too much. You know that. How do you shift that story? How do you barricade it? How do you not let it in? How do you talk to someone? Like whatever you got to do. I just believe this is a crucial time.
I do too, in people's lives. I think that what you do there's this analogy in anti-aging. Dr. David Sinclair's been on my show a few times, and he goes, hey, if you can get to like 75 in this day and age, you're probably going to live to 100 if you can get to 75.
Wow.
And in the world today, I really believe that if you can get this next 2 years nailed, you've got 20-year type multipliers of wealth, bliss, and happiness in your life. If you can get but if you don't these next 2 years, I think the difficulty of getting there is magnified by a huge factor. I think right now is a chance to get way ahead. That same analogy to get to 75 gets you to 100. I think if you can get these next 2 years, just momentum. You have to make millions of dollars, but you just get momentum. You get in your groove. You get moving. But if you stay stagnant, another couple years, you don't get something going. The longer you do that, it's harder to get that sucker going again. And I feel like it'll be much harder. Those people that get moving now, and by the way, it might evolve. You may start marketing one thing right now and it evolves into something else over time, but you've got to get in motion right now. Do you agree with that?
Oh, true story. I heard somebody say it's a strategic byproduct. How many times in life have we had a goal, and when we have the nerve to go after the goal, we find something that's a strategic byproduct of the goal that's way bigger. Way bigger. You never thought you'd have one of the top podcasts in the world, one of the top books in the world. It's a strategic byproduct of you going all in on your businesses, wanting to impact others.
Great point.
Right?
That's a great point.
So know that whether it's God, the universe, rewards you for just having the nerve to go after it. And usually your goal, you're something so much bigger or something different that actually aligns with you. There's a couple of things I think as we're at this point in the podcast, I want to say this. There's a couple of things. If you're going to protect yourself, build a moat. Build a moat on your emotions. And what I'd say is the news is going to get worse. That's a fact. Conversations with your negative friends is going to get worse. That's a fact. I would say if you really want to stop dabbling, it's somebody who's saying they want to lose weight, but when no one's watching, they're eating the wrong food. Or someone says they want to start the business, but when no one's watching, they're binging out on Netflix. If you're that person, and I'm not knocking you, if that's who you are, enjoy it, live it, but don't say you want it. Don't talk out of two sides of your mouth. Like either go all in, burn the boats and do it, or just accept the life that you have. Like I hate to be real, but you can't lose weight and not work out and eat bad. Like it just doesn't, or you can't make more money, have Ed's life or someone else's life that you see. You can't have that without putting the work in. So if you're going to put the work in, you have to have the mindset to be committed and dedicated to it, right? We have to be disciplined. What robs discipline is lack of confidence, insecurity, uncertainty, whatever word you want to use. So here's what I'm going to share. What are the things that make you uncertain or lack of confidence? I would build a moat around those things. If there's certain people in your life that are going to make you feel insecure, believe me, it's going to feel worse during a recession and tough time. Spend less time with them or find a way to be a mirror or be a Teflon. If watching the news, whether it's CNN or MSNBC or Fox, whatever one you want to watch, if when you watch the news, you get frustrated, you get scared, you get uncertain, you get pissed off, stop watching the news. You need that energy for you. So what I'd say is I would figure out the things that rob your confidence and rob your certainty. And this is going to sound like, oh, Dean's really smart, is do less of those. Like, especially over this next year. You want to take a challenge, go on a 30-day news diet. Don't talk about it. Don't watch the news. Don't talk, and spend 100% of that energy on you 2.0. Take the next 30 days and do not surf the internet. All of you are getting sucked into, let me just see what Ed Mylett did. And an hour later, like, oh my God, I just burned an hour online, right? I would say just find the things, avoid the things that rob your confidence. Don't talk to the negative people that are hurting you. Don't focus on your weaknesses. Identify who your villain is, who that inner story that's already cost you too much, and protect yourself against it. Investigate to where the puck is going. You do those things, and this time you're ahead of 95% of the world, and they're simple. That's not, I didn't give you a business plan. I gave you just the foundation of what can make you thrive in this shifting time.
When I hear you say all those things, I think about energy. I think about do things that preserve and increase your energy and don't deplete them. So if there's people around you that rob your energy, you got to reduce it. If there's things you're doing that take your energy, whether it's worry, fear, surfing the internet, watching news, those other things. Energy, and we all talk about it. I don't know who's first at it or whatever, but energy is influence. We've talked about this a lot. Tony talks about it a lot. You do, I do. And energy is also the most important commodity you can possibly have in your life. And you're going to watch a bunch of people, whether you call it words, thoughts, etc. You're going to watch a lot of people starting now through the next 2 or 3 years of their lives. You're going to watch their energy change. You're going to watch their vibrational frequency shrink. You're going to watch them shrink. And that's incumbent upon you to feed your energy right now. That's podcasts, that's books, that's events, that's a challenge like what you're doing right now with Tony. You got to feed your energy. Highest energy wins. Highest energy will win. And
amen to that.
And I'm going to tell you, everyone's energy is going to evolve and change. It is difficult when everyone's thriving. Why? Everyone's energy is pretty damn good. High energy will stand out now. Positive energy, optimistic energy, movement energy, momentum energy is going to stand out more than ever. And you're going to see energy change in your investments, in your mindset, in your businesses, all over the place. It's pretty amazing that you grew up with this unbelievable gift of your talent. Your Texas football is religion. You're a quarterback. You're unbelievable. You're going to the best place to go play. You come from a good family. Then you have even all these other upsides that happen. So that happens. It's 13 years ago today. And now you've made this commitment to your mom. Well, there's commitments and then there's commitments. So I know very little about prison, but I have had some good friends go. And so I want you to walk us through this. Now you've made a commitment to your mom that you're not going to get involved in one of these racial groups, which is where most 99.9% of the guys go to hide at some point. And even those groups, sometimes you have to fight your way in. So what's that like? You're in prison now, and I'm sure the Aryan Brotherhood are trying to get you into their good graces, and everybody else is coming after you. What do you just start fighting, or what happens?
Yeah, well, I mean, to answer the question, I've got about 2 months here while I'm in Dallas County Jail, waiting to be transported to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. They send a prison bus to come pick you up with guards that are armed. But in that 2-month period,
this is awesome.
I'm running around Dallas County Jail, and I'm asking all these guys that have been in prison before, how am I going to survive? What am I going to do? I'm in game mode now. I'm like, oh man, this is really happening. And every guy I talk to, man, Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, they say the same thing. You got to get into a gang. You will not survive without a gang. They told me the lie that so many people hear in the streets of America, the gang will be your family. The gang is going to love you. The gang is going to protect you. All lies, Ed. Now, what wasn't a lie is they said you're going to the worst part of the prison system where everybody in the building you live on has life. They call this the life sentence building.
Jeez.
West, get into a gang. Save your life, get into a gang. But there was this one guy that was so different in Dallas County, this old black man named Mr. Jackson. And Mr. Jackson's what you call a career criminal. Dude's been in our prison almost like 4 or 5 times, right? But he's the most positive guy I've ever met, Ed. This guy had a smile on his face everywhere he went. You couldn't knock the smile off of Jackson's face. And every morning, man, every morning, this man would come up to my cell, to my bunk, and he'd pick me up like a ray of sunshine in that dark place with his positive energy, right? So one morning, Mr. Jackson comes up. He's got a cup of coffee in his hands.
This is awesome.
And a smile on his face. He said, West, he said, I've been watching how you're dealing with those knuckleheads and those dummies. Talk about you got to get into a gang. He said, do not listen to these fools. He said, you want to keep that promise you made to your mom and your dad? Then let me tell you what prison's going to be like. So he tells me, he said, the first thing you need to understand about prison, he said, prison's all about race. And he said, race is the big dynamic in there because all the inmates want it to be about race. And he was right, Ed. I mean, that's the whole overriding dynamic of prison. He said, because it's about race, when you walk in the door of the Life Sentence building, he said, you're going to see a TV set in that day room. And in front of the TV set, they have rows of benches. He said, the first row of benches, you can't sit on that row. That's for the blacks. You're going to get your head smashed in. You sit on that row. The second row, you can't sit on that one either. That's for the Hispanics. They'll smash your head into. He said, the third row, if there's a third row, is where the white folks sit. He said, if there's no third row, white folks sit on the floor. That's the way the numbers work in prison. He said it's the opposite of the free world. You don't have the numbers in there like you have out here. So don't get into a wreck over race. He said, but because it's about race, when you walk in the door, the white gangs get the first dibs on you. He said the Aryan Brotherhood, the Aryan Circle, the White Knights, the Woods, he's naming all the white prison gangs. He said you have to fight all of them if you want to be independent from them. He said you don't have a choice in this. You have to fight if you want to be independent. He said if you don't give in to their ideology of hate out of fear. And let me tell you what I learned about fear. I learned that fear is a liar. Fear makes you see things that aren't there, makes you believe things that are not real. In fact, I would argue fears aren't even real. Fear's in your head. Fear is how you perceive a situation. Danger is real. You have to respect danger. But fear's not real. And Jackson's telling me don't give in to this artificial thing called fear. But get ready, because once you get done with the white gangs, the black gangs are coming next. The Crips, the Bloods, the Gangster Disciples, Mandingo Warriors. He's naming all the black prison gangs. Yeah, he said you have to fight all of them. He said, if you survive all this, Wes, and he said, and you can survive all this, he said, you're going to earn the right to walk alone. He said, the strongest man in prison always walks alone.
Wow.
He told me about fighting. And this is a truth that I've shared. I've spoken to hundreds of audiences the last 6 years since I've been out of prison. And this is something I always leave them with. He said, you don't have to win all your fights, but you do have to fight all your fights. What a huge lesson in life, right? Yeah. Because that tells you that some days you're going to win and some days you're going to lose. I'm not saying losing is a great thing you should aspire to, but you're going to lose sometimes. Yeah. And you're not going to win all your fights. Yeah. But when you lose, get up. And that's what he's saying. Don't stay down. Get up. But when he's telling me this back in 2009, man, 13 years ago, I'm looking back at this guy like a deer in the headlights, man. All this violence and terror I'm about to walk into. So he says, Wes, let me break it down for you another way. He said, I want you to imagine prison as a pot of boiling water.
This is the best thing I've ever heard.
He
right,
said,
what you're about to say.
Oh man, this is it's wild, and this is something that everybody can grab onto. This thing. This is the whole crux of the presentation. Yeah. He said, imagine prison as a pot of boiling water. He said, anything we put to this pot of boiling water is going to be changed by the heat and the pressure inside that pot. He said, I'm going to put 3 things in this pot of boiling water and watch how they change: a carrot, an egg, and a coffee bean. So he walks me through it. He said, so first things first. He said, if I put a carrot in the pot of boiling water we call prison, he said, what happens to the carrot? And I'm like, Mr. Jackson, the carrot's going to turn soft. And he said, that's right, Wes. He said, but the carrot went in the water hard. But the water, the prison, turned that hard carrot soft and mushy and weak. Didn't take long. He said the carrot got beat. He got robbed. May got raped. May got killed. You don't want to be this carrot, Wes. He said, what about the egg? What happened to the egg in the pot of boiling water we call prison? And I'm like, well, Mr. Jackson, the egg is going to turn hard, man, like a hard-boiled egg. He said, that's right, Wes. He said the egg has a shell that protects it physically, but inside that shell, that soft liquid core, the egg's heart became hardened. He said, if your heart becomes hardened, you're incapable of giving or receiving love. And he said, if you're incapable of giving or receiving love in that place, you become institutionalized, and you will not come back as someone your parents recognize. He said, because your eggshell's going to have swastikas tattooed all over it. Then he asked me, he said, what about the coffee bean, Wes? And Ed, I didn't have an answer for this dude. I didn't know what happened to a coffee bean in a pot of boiling water. And that's when this man that looked nothing like me, he didn't come from the same America I came from, Ed. Didn't believe the same things I believed, fundamentally or spiritually. This is a black Muslim man from the streets of Dallas, Texas, y'all. I'm a white Catholic guy from a little bitty town called Port Arthur. Gosh. But this man's so different than me, shared with me one of the most important and transformational messages I've ever received. And I tell people all the time, man, if you ever shut yourself off to people because of their differences, different race, different gender, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, man, if you close yourself off to people because of their differences, you're going to miss some of the most important lessons and some of the best friendships in this life.
Amen,
because this man told me that day, he said, if I put a coffee bean in that same pot of boiling water we call prison, he said, now you have to change the name of the water to coffee. Because he said the coffee bean, Ed, he said the coffee bean had the power to change the entire atmosphere inside that pot because the power was inside that coffee bean. And he said, just like the power's inside you. And he told me the coffee bean's the only thing that'll change the water. The carrot is changed by the water. The eggs are changed by the water. Coffee beans are the only thing that change the water. And the last thing he tells me, the last thing I hear from Mr. Jackson, he says, Wes, go out there and go be a coffee bean. Now, Ed, I walk into prison, and it is a baptism by fire, man. Inside the first 10 minutes, man, I'm in a fight with a big, huge Aryan Brotherhood guy. Dude beats me from one side of the day room to the other. First 10 minutes, man. It's on. And Jackson told me what to expect. He said, man, the first guy that comes up to you when you walk in the door, he's not a threat. He's an information gatherer. He's a scout. He's gonna be a white guy because you're white. He's gonna ask you this question: what gang do you want to be a part of? What family do you want? They call gangs families. Get him out of your face as fast as you can and get ready. He said, because the second guy that comes up, he's not coming to talk to you. He's coming to fight you. He said he's coming to hurt you. He said, when this guy gets within range, put your fist in his mouth. Hit him as hard as you can. Don't even let him get a word in. And Ed, when I walk in the door, man, I'm there. I got my bags and my property. I set them on the ground, put my back against the wall, stumbling up in a couple minutes. A little bitty white dude, a little bald-headed white dude, tatted up from head to toe. Even his eyelids are tatted up, right? And he comes up, he gets in my face. Hey, white boy, what family you riding with?
Look at your face change. Yeah.
Man. I'm like, dude, I'm riding with God. Please just leave me alone. I'm riding with God. He laughed at me, Ed. He said, God isn't here, white boy, because we kicked him out. He said, but we're here and we're coming to get you. Get ready. Stumbles up the stairs. A few minutes later, biggest corn-fed white dude I've ever seen in my life. He's coming down. He points at me from third row. Huge dude, muscled up, man. He's coming down the stairwell. He's bald-headed with a swastika around the top. Swastika on the dome of his head, man. All I see is a swastika, two beady eyeballs and muscles coming at me. Dude, Ed, I played sports all my life, man. When that guy got within range, I can be coached. Bam! I hit the dude as hard as I could. Didn't even phase him. This dude beat me down. But Ed, that was what life was like in prison. For the first 2 months, I spent fighting there, fighting for my life. But I had Mr. Jackson telling me that you don't have to win those fights, but you have to fight those fights. And I lost most of my fights in there, Ed. I tell people all the time, man, I probably got 3 dozen fights the whole time I was there and lost 75% of those fights.
That's what I wanted to ask you.
Physically lost, Ed. Imagine waking up every day knowing that you're going to get your butt handed to you, but that's your day, and you have to face your day. And it was a training ground. It was a massive if you want it to be, it's a massive training ground. It's finding that opportunity in adversity. It's what you talk about, Ed. The other side of your adversity, the other side of your fears is the best version of you, but I had to go through all that to get to where I wanted to be.
I want to talk about this some more, by the way. Now everyone knows what the heck I was talking about when I introduced you. Right?
First 10 minutes, man, we're rolling.
Rolling. There's a lesson in there I want to share with you that I got from my dad's sobriety, and I know we'll talk a little bit about this as we go today too, but so about 3 weeks ago, man, I wrote this whole book about, the one mores, and I woke my wife up. I was really emotional. And I said, babe, wake up. And I said, hey, someone help Daddy. She said, what? I said, someone helped my dad. The most important decision of my entire life is my dad's decision to get sober. You and I probably aren't talking if he doesn't. I've reached millions of people because my dad made this decision. My kids, my dad's grandkids, our whole lives are changed. It never occurred to me, man, someone helped my dad.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it. And she goes, my gosh, I said, that precious soul who met my father in the darkest moment of his life, the most dark, ashamed place of his life, completely changed my father's life forever and changed mine and millions of other people's lives.
Yes.
They didn't even know it. I said, babe, that's crazy. One human being in their humanity reached out and helped my dad in some dark room or a coffee shop or a bar somewhere. And I said, that's not the most amazing part, even though that's amazing. What qualified this person to help my dad?
Give me chills, dude.
Dude, what qualified them to help my dad was the things they were the most ashamed of.
Yes.
Was their drunkenness, was their drug addiction, was the things they did they're the most embarrassed and ashamed of that they think disqualified them from ever doing anything great in their life, or maybe their average, ordinary existence was the very thing that prepared them. God was preparing them to intervene in my dad's life and change my family forever.
Absolutely.
And then I could see it in your eyes. That's the same thing with Mr. Jackson.
Yes.
This guy's, you're talking to him at the jail because he'd been in that system and was still there. The things that he probably made the biggest mistakes of his life are what prepared him to serve you and help you in the most scared, dark moment of your life. His things he's most ashamed of and embarrassed by is what his preparation was to change your life.
Absolutely. It was his knowledge. That was what he had to pass on. That was his great contribution to humanity, was passing this on to somebody he felt was worthy of the knowledge that he had gained the hardest way possible, man.
Come on, man. This is what people need to get.
That's what your dad got from his sponsor, man.
Right. And that's what millions are getting from you. Here we go. So here's the thing. This is what people need to get about life.
Yes.
These things that you think disqualify you are actually the great qualifiers for you to help change other people's lives, including your own.
They're not liabilities, man. They're assets.
That's right.
Yes.
People, I don't know if there's ever been a more magic moment in a podcast in the history of podcasts than this, because it's a freaking fact that person changed my dad's life. Jackson saves your life, probably,
yes.
Right?
Well, yeah.
And now you're telling the story of the coffee bean, which, by the way, is a book that you and John Gordon wrote that people can get, is about the coffee bean, which is an incredible book. That's a story no one will ever forget the history of their life. But it's the fact that you had this drug addiction and meth addiction and committed these crimes that qualifies you to sit in the seat today, that qualified Jackson to be with you, that qualified this person to help my dad, that qualifies me to share this stuff with people. It's insane how this stuff works.
It's mind-boggling, man, because
awesome.
it's like everything is connected. We are all connected, man. And if we're willing to turn our mess into a message, and that's the thing, man. It's like everybody. That's one of the things I wanted to come on your show for. It's because I know you got a lot of listeners out there that struggle, because everybody struggles.
Yes.
Everybody you meet in life struggles in life, man.
Yes.
But it's tapping into each other. That's how we're going to get through. We have to serve each other. This is my way of serving, by passing on this message that Jack, not only pass on the message that Jackson gave me, but to share an amazing story that goes with it, because you can't deny what you can see. People say, okay, well, the coffee bean, but then they see that this thing happened, this biggest pot of blood. People's biggest fear, Ed, that they tell me is going to prison. That's like everybody's biggest fear in the world. And I not only went in there, I didn't just survive, I thrived inside of a maximum security prison. But the real magic isn't just the coffee bean by itself. It was the spiritual awakening that had to happen to make the coffee bean into what it is today. Because inside that prison, I grew more over the next 7 years to 3 months spiritually than I ever did anywhere else in my life. Imagine that, man. You go into a dungeon and you become the best version of yourself, like a cocoon. Like a caterpillar goes in and comes out a butterfly. This is what happened to me inside that prison. I had a spiritual awakening. And I truly believe, Ed, that for us, like you said, to meet the best version of yourself on the other side of the adversity, this has to be a spiritual thing. You can't do this by you. It has to be a spiritual thing. That's what I believe. Now, and I'm not saying it's a religious thing. You can believe whatever religion you want. I'm like you. I listen to your stuff, and you do a great job of delineating the fact that you're a Christian. I'm a Christian. I'm not telling anybody they have to be a Christian to pursue this. But find whatever it is you feel like is your higher power, and go after that, and let that higher power surrender to the higher power. And this is the spiritual part that happened when I got into a program recovery inside that prison. I wouldn't be here without the program recovery.
We're going to talk about that. I want to stay on this, because what you just said is like, bro, this was just supposed to happen right now. It's supposed to happen on this day.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that it's happening. But man, I'm so excited for everyone listening to this right now, just because I love my family. That's the audience of the show.
Could I say I love your energy level, dude?
Thank you, man.
And I figured, man, I'm going to go into this thing, and I try to read. Prison helps you read people, man. I can read rooms, right? Because I had to do it to survive. But I've followed you and listened to you and I watch your stories on Instagram and all that. And you seem like the kind of guy that matches the energy of the people you're in the room with. And that's exactly, you lived up to it, man. You're like, dude, this is great.
Well, but it's real. Like, you're firing me up, and it inspires me, right? And like, I'm thinking about the metaphor, like, ironically, probably that worst day of your life 13 years ago, I think the Lord was like, hey, I'm going to pluck you out of society, bro, because you're going to die.
Dude, that's exactly the term I use.
It's really, okay, I want you to speak to it. And then the other thing is, like, you literally physically got beaten down. And life is beating people down metaphorically oftentimes in life. You literally went in and took physical beatings forever. Do you feel like that's part of what had to happen for you?
Ed, it's crazy. And y'all listen, when we didn't rehearse this or anything, man, but you said pluck. I use that term all the time when I'm speaking to people, that I feel like God, what I believe is God. I'm a Christian, so that's when I talk about God, that's what I'm saying. So I believe that God sent angels down to me that were in the form of SWAT team in Dallas. This Dallas SWAT team, those were my saviors, man. They plucked me out of a world that I wasn't going to get out of, man. I mean, I wasn't leaving the Uptown burglary crime spree alive, or a version of myself that was worth living, right? I truly believe God sent his angels down, and they're armed. They look like they're just in the massive body armor and everything. There's guns in my faces. They're screaming, don't move, don't move. And it's chaos. I didn't see it like that at the time, but Ed, July 30th, 2008, when that SWAT team came to get me, they didn't arrest me that day. They rescued me that day, brother. I got rescued by a SWAT team that God sent down and said, hey, you know what? You're not living up to what I need you to be doing, or I've got a plan for you. I've got a plan for you, and let me put you on this path, because I got to break you down first to make you that person. Because I tell people all the time, Ed, man, God doesn't set bushes on fire anymore. He says people on fire, man. And that's
so
and I'm just like, I get to be one of those people, but everybody gets to be one of those people if they choose to be. But that's a spiritual awakening that you have to have.
Brother, I think there's the SWAT teams of life are coming all the time for people, and if they'd see them, for what they really are, that'd be true. Sometimes that SWAT team is you just had a bankruptcy. You just lost your job. It's the SWAT team coming to rescue you. You know, you just had a relationship end. You know, you're struggling as an entrepreneur. You got a bunch of adversity. Someone just quit on you. Just lost a big account. That could literally be the SWAT team for you. And when you're listening to shows like this, when you get inspired by these stories, you need to think about how it applies to your own life. That's what moves you. It's not just Damon's story. It's how it applies for you. How it transcends just the story, but the principles, right?
But I want to sort of start in football,
right,
because I think that's where some of the defining moments of your life started to happen. So take my audience through your football career a little bit, and then what took place for you and what you were learning, who you were at that time, those kinds of things.
So just like a lot of kids, that was my dream, to be a professional athlete since I was a little kid. I had 2 older brothers, so I had really no choice. You know, they made me be that. And so blessed enough, high school, went to Baylor. Then I went to the NFL, but I was supposed to be drafted in the 4th round. I didn't get the call, so I think that was like my first shot at not feeling like I was enough.
So you're sitting there on draft day with your family, second day probably, thinking I'm gonna get a call, and it never happens.
Never happened. And of course my mom was like, "You're okay," and I'm like, "I'm okay" when I'm not okay.
You weren't okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's your first bout of I may not be enough.
Yep, my first time of when I look back in my story, my journey. That's the first time I really felt like that. Got a call from my uncle, coaches for the Chargers now, but he was with the Vikings, and he kind of was my advisor to where to go as a free agent. Okay. So he told me to go with Coach Dungy, because he's like, Coach Dungy, I know him as a man. He's going to give you a fair shake. So I went to the Indianapolis Colts, and
they had a pretty good quarterback.
Yeah, it was Peyton Manning.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
Yeah, he's pretty good. You know, he's all right. You know, Reggie Wayne, Marvin Harrison. So, and that's the year after they won the Super Bowl.
Oh, wow.
So it was great to be in that environment.
Okay. So everybody needs to know he's a wide receiver, and Reggie Wayne and Marvin Harrison, one's a Hall of Famer, one's going to be a Hall of Famer. So you're in pretty good company, and with one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time.
Exactly. I mean, it's a dream come true. I had to pitch myself and not freak out when I first seen these guys. Right?
I'm sure.
So I had a great preseason, probably the best in the NFL that year. Definitely out of rookies, but even out of just all the players. I think maybe top receiver in the NFL during the preseason. Of course, you know, the main guys aren't playing all the games, you know, so I'm getting more snaps. And so I was for sure I was going to make the team. Okay. You know, I'm doing good on special teams. I'm like, good, I'm going to make the team. Get a call in on, of course, the cut day, and I get cut.
Whoa.
And so that's another shot at my confidence and feeling like I'm not enough, right? I'm like, man, I did the best I can do. I performed great. And Reggie told me something, I don't know if he remembers this, but he said, about this league, you have to understand something. It's about timing, it's about opportunity. So you can play your best preseason and get cut. You can play an average season and make the team. And so I got cut, but I made the practice squad, so I was cool with that. I got an apartment, I bought myself a truck, which I shouldn't have did, but I did it. Right? That was like my promise to myself, I'm gonna get the truck.
Right.
Bought myself a truck, and within a week, I get a call from a 317 number, and that's Indianapolis. I'm at the bank actually, cashing my first, putting my first check in there. It's like, hey, Trent, where are you at? And I was like, I'm at the bank, and it's like, well, come into the office and bring your stuff. So at that point, I didn't know what that meant. I was like, okay, I don't know what that means. So I come in there, bring my stuff, and they said, we got to release you.
Oh, no. Oh, my gosh.
After I got my apartment, I got my car.
Oh, my God.
So I have to drive from Indy to Texas, which is a long drive after you get fired.
Home.
Exactly. Home.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm depressed, man. I'm there for 2 weeks. I get a call back from Indianapolis. They call and bring me back.
Bring you back.
Then 3 weeks later, I get cut.
Emotional roller coaster.
Roller coaster. And that was my whole career, just to be honest with you. With Seattle, it was the same thing. I mean, I tell this story a lot. I remember being in Dallas, and I get a call from Seattle in my second year. I was with the Seahawks. And they say, Trent, we want to bring you back. And I was like, hey, well, can I come tomorrow? Because it was an off day. And they say, no, you need to come now, because I had to drive from Dallas to Fort Worth, pack my stuff. And it's like, just come now, bring it back, go to the airport. So I rush home. Of course, like what most people do, I call my parents, I get on Facebook, and I'm like, hey, I'm going back to Seattle. God is really working in my life. As soon as I get to the airport, the phone rings.
Oh my gosh.
206 number. Like, hello, and he's like, have you left yet? And I was like, no, I haven't left. Good, because we basically changed our mind.
Oh,
and at that point, that's when depression hit. That's when I felt, I questioned God, I questioned my faith. Even me talking to God, why would you bring me this far just to fail me?
Yeah.
And honestly, I didn't really care about living. Not saying that I want to actually grab a gun and shoot myself, but I didn't care about life anymore.
Whoa.
There was only one reason that kept me living, and that was my son.
It was your son.
It was my son. He was born in 2008 in that process, and that whole process kept going. And
was that Tristan?
That was Tristan. That was Tristan, man. And it was hard, man.
So obviously one of the lower points in your life, right?
Yeah.
So you said you focused on Tristan a little bit. Is that what some of the recommendations you would give to other people, that when they're down on something is to find something even outside of yourself? Or what
Something
would you
that's
recommend?
bigger than you.
Something bigger than you.
Something that's bigger than you, because I just feel like you're living for yourself, right? If it's all about you, I tell people this all the time, if it's all about you, more than likely you're gonna quit. But when you have something that's bigger than you, a lot of people say your why, your reason, what's the reason why you wake up every single day?
Yes.
You're not gonna give up, because you're giving up on them.
Wow. I believe that, because your story, although it's sports related, I think people would be surprised that confidence is even fragile at the highest levels, right?
Yeah.
I mean, most people would look at you and go, okay, unbelievable college football player, gets a chance to play professionally with some of the best players. One thing he doesn't lack is confidence. And that's one thing everybody should know. I lack confidence all the time. My confidence is fragile, man.
Yeah.
Like, you get a couple rejections, couple setbacks. I have to go through all those habits and rituals myself. But it's interesting to me because your story, even though it's football, isn't that dissimilar for most people listening to this.
Yeah.
Most people have had their hopes up, whether it's a relationship or a business. It looks like it's going, then it's not. Then you get down, then you pick yourself back up. It looks like it's going, and then it's not. And I think some people think, man, I've picked myself up so many times.
Right.
Do I have that in me again to pick myself up off the floor yet again? What would you say to them about that?
You do have it, and there's always a greater purpose than your pain that you're going through. I think that we focus on the present moment, and we kind of say my life is over because something is over. Just because that relationship is over, just because that job is over, doesn't mean your life is over. And I'm like a living testament. I mean, so many. Your story, I'm sure, is a living testament to it. When you just can tell yourself, I don't know, what that something else is.
Yes.
But there's something more to my life, and that's what I held on to. And I didn't know it would be this.
Sure.
But I just knew I couldn't afford to keep my life in that place of pain.
It's amazing because you and I were talking off camera. It's like oftentimes, this is hokey, it's a meme. Your test can become your testimony.
Yes.
Everything's happening for me and not to me. But these are truths, right? It's always true in hindsight. Like, the fact of the matter is, maybe you'd have played 3 or 4 years in the NFL, had a halfway decent career, saved a couple $100,000 and went into selling, mortgages somewhere or insurance somewhere. You would have never reached the millions of people that you've reached. You wouldn't be sitting here right now.
I can guarantee you 100% I wouldn't be here. If it wasn't for my struggle, if it wasn't for me losing my everything, right, I wouldn't be here.
It's amazing. And the other thing people can relate to too is like their first big dream didn't happen.
Yeah.
I do too. Like everyone in your family thought you were gonna be a football player. Everybody had your back on that. Everyone. And then so it's sometimes when our dream fails or a relationship fails, we haven't just let ourselves down. We've let down people all around us, and that impacts people too, right? So you said you focused on Tristan.
Yeah.
What took place then? So the career ends.
Yeah.
You've got a son, which we'll talk about in a minute, a little bit about the family life, because all that follow, if you don't follow Trent stuff, you're going to see this is one of the most vulnerable, thoughtful, positive people on all of social media. That's why his following is so big. But he doesn't ever try to come across like he's got it all figured out all the time. That's what I love about you.
I don't.
Because neither do I. Why? People say, man, you get so excited with your guests here. I'm like, these guests are here for me, right? Like, man. I'm learning from them. I got something to bring to the table. I know I do, but I've learned so much from the people that are my guests, including you on and off camera. So you go through that time, and I know what it's like to have a career like that end as well. I wasn't as good as you were at my sport, but I understand that. So you're focused on your son. What then happened after your career?
Right, so I remember being in my mom's room, and it wasn't a magical moment. Like, I wish I could paint this story to tell you that it was some magical moment that led me there, but I remember being in my mom's, in my room in my mom's house. And I remember just looking around my room and seeing like all my football accomplishments. I seen pictures of Tristan, and I broke down and started crying. Like, literally, it wasn't some crazy thing that led me to that.
Yeah.
And at that moment, and I still live by these words, I said, it all starts with you. I said, you can either sink or you can swim. You can have this be the end of your life or the beginning to something better.
Beautiful.
And said, and I came up with these words. It's rehab time. I never want to be a speaker. This is my biggest fear, and we can get into that. This is my biggest fear. You ask my parents, they'll tell you I'm the most introverted kid that they have.
Me too.
I'm an introvert by nature.
Me
People,
too.
I don't know. I don't know how that works, but I'm an introvert. And I had no idea of social media following, any of that. I literally just said it's rehab time. And rehab for me meant putting a strength back into a weakness. If we're all honest, we have something in our life that we can rehab.
Yes.
Something that we can get better. And so for me, it meant going to the gym at 12 o'clock at night. And this was 2008, so I had one more try with the Redskins. And it's funny how I feel like God can use something to get you out of your funk, even though that's not the it that he wants for your life. And so I ran a 4.3, I got signed with the Redskins, and I'm living this rehab time journey. I get cut, but I was good then.
Yeah, you're okay this time.
I was okay. It was different than I just knew that there was something more
Wow.
to my life.
Wow.
Second situation that really happened, that happened to me that really woke me up was my college roommate committing suicide. One of my best friends. And when that happened, I went to his service and I realized that life isn't promised. And I realized this is my boy that was going through struggles, that silent battles that I didn't know about.
Yes.
I felt like I wasn't there for him, so much guilt. I promised him, I said, Aunt, I'm gonna make you more alive in my life than you ever been.
Man.
And that's why I do what I do today.
So you found this gigantic purpose that was bigger than your
Huge,
fear
man.
of speaking or your introverted nature.
Big, way bigger than that.
Yeah.
And he's more alive in my life than he's ever been. You know?
He's alive right now.
Exactly.
We're talking about him.
Exactly.
See, it's funny thing is that we've all lost people in our lives. And I always tell people, I said, you should honor them with who
Big
you
time.
become, right? And that's really what you've done for him. There's so many lessons. We've only about 11 minutes into this or 8 minutes into it. But I want to go back. I want everyone to understand this, that even at the top level in sports, in business, and entertainment, you're going to find that we all have a chance. We can all lose our confidence. We can all get down. We've all struggled with false start after false start, getting our hopes up and being slammed back down. I love your point of finding a purpose bigger than you. I absolutely love that. And then also honoring the people in your life who maybe have transitioned out of it like he has.
So as you guys know, about 2 years ago, I started on this journey to learning Spanish, and I've gotten pretty good. I was just on a trip to Mexico and got quite a few compliments on my Spanish game. And the reason I've got pretty good is Babbel. So for you in 2024, maybe getting a little bit better every day would be great for you, especially at learning a second language or a third or fourth or fifth. When you're learning a new language with Babbel, it's exactly what you're doing. You're getting better. They can help you start speaking a new language in like 3 weeks. Imagine what you could do in a year with Babbel. Dive into these lessons. They're crafted by over 200 language experts. They're 10 minutes long. They're easy. So whether you're learning Spanish or French or any of Babbel's 14 languages, you'll be ready for a real-world conversation in no time. So don't let this chance slip by. Here's a special limited-time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/Mylett. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/Mylett, spelled BABBEL.com/Mylett. Rules and restrictions may apply. Please visit babbel.com for details. So let's go to the story first, then we'll get tactical, because it's just a bananas story.
Yeah.
But you used to have a very large following.
Right.
On social media that, I don't know, I'd see you with champagne bottles and jets and
Right.
I don't know if you have 9 exotic cars or something like
Right,
that. So
9
take us
exotics.
back to about that time in your life, what you were doing then.
Yeah, definitely. So I was about 27, 28 years old. I just moved to Los Angeles. I had sold my recent company for not a lot of money, but I was living outside of my means. I was spending money way faster than I was bringing it in. But on social media, I was just making it seem like I was printing money and I had this big baller extravagant lifestyle. And so, you know, about 4 nights a week or so, we were in the club, popping bottles, $5,000 bar tabs, 9 exotic cars, house in the Hollywood Hills with 4 stories, sort of that whole Hollywood bachelor lifestyle that you can imagine. Yeah.
And that sells on social, right? So you had the Jet Set Life brand, was the brand at the time, and it was growing. But I remember watching it thinking, I wonder if this is real.
Yeah.
You know, I remember thinking that. And
I was wondering the same thing.
It's a little bit surreal for me to now meet this, I'd consider to be this man who creates the most spiritual and moral content that grabs your heart compared to what I used to watch. It's just such a stunning turnaround. But if we went back to those times, I think a lot of people can relate to this. You all sort of have someone on social media, maybe they're following that fits this description, or you know someone like that. What was the pressures like for you to be probably, I assume you're spending money you don't have at the time. Were you thinking, man, this is eventually going to catch up, or were you worried you were going to kind of get, I don't know, exposed or run out of money? What were you thinking?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the thing is that you have to constantly be upping it to take it to the next level, right? So today, if I'm to buy a Mercedes, then tomorrow that needs to be a Ferrari, and then it needs to keep leveling up as you go. And so what I started at was just traveling the world, you know, living pretty well, and then I was like, how do I take it to the next level? How do I take it to the next level? And so I constantly felt this pressure to outdo myself, and I almost felt like the followers expected it. I needed to do it for them. And so I created this alter ego that it was just became like an unsustainable lifestyle very, very quickly,
Yeah.
but I didn't know where that would end. I didn't know how to stop that. And so it became pretty clear that at some point I wasn't gonna be able to sustain it. And I ended up going dark on social media and creating and deleting all my content for 4 years.
This is a remarkable part
Yeah.
of the story coming up, you guys. Before we go to the dark place where you
Right.
went off for a while, I think a lot of people want that life you were showing,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And the bottles, the club, all, especially my younger listeners. I'm curious,
Yeah.
were you happy then?
You know, I was living for the moment. And so anytime you're living for the moment, like you feel happy right then and there, but then you go to sleep at night not really loving the person that you are. And it's this emptiness that you feel. Like I was chasing short-term instantaneous pleasure. So it feels great for that second, but you can't help but feel this hollowing feeling that's growing inside of you. It's like an addiction, just like anything else, where the cause of the addiction and the solution are sort of the same thing, where in order to fill that void that I was feeling, I felt like I needed more of that. I needed another hit.
Yeah.
I needed to show another exotic car. I needed to show another, night out at the club popping bottles. And then so I would go do that. I'd feel good for the second, but then that next day I would just have this really empty feeling and I would start all over again.
Yeah, I'm wondering if, such a good description too. I'm wondering if when you need that short-term pleasure that you're seeking,
Right.
then you also start to kind of chase short-term quick money.
Yeah,
Also true to fill up
absolutely.
that void. Was that happening with you too?
Oh yeah, however you can make the quickest buck possible. It's
Yeah.
all part of that short-term thinking mentality that, was the reason that I wasn't able to sort of unlock my full potential.
Yeah.
And being able to switch from that short-term thinking to that long-term thinking was really pivotal in helping me find success.
Yeah.
And now sort of build something way more sustainable and lasting.
And more impactful too. What about the
Absolutely.
people around you
Yeah.
during those days?
It's just like the podcast I was listening to by you just a few minutes ago. I was surrounding myself by people that wanted to be a part of that flashy lifestyle. And so naturally, I was attracting people to me that wanted to be there because of what I could offer,
Yeah.
because of the flash, because of the cars, because of the houses, not because I'm a nice guy or I'm a good person. And it's not their fault. I didn't realize that at the time. I was blaming everybody around me as to why I failed and why I went through so much hardship. But then I got to a point in my life, it was around 30 years old, where I realized that it's my fault that I'm attracting all these people into my life because that's what I'm putting out there. That was the magnet that I was putting out into the world.
Yeah.
So naturally, I was bringing in all these people that wanted to sort of use me for something or didn't really love me for who I was.
So profound, because when you do that, everybody, when you do lead with your stuff
Right.
or your achievements, you are the one who's put that barrier up between you and other people to get to know the real you. The
Exactly.
barrier are those things.
Right.
All that, happens to me often at the different clubs I belong to or the golf courses where I'll meet a really rich dude,
Yeah.
and his MO all his life is within the first minute he's got to tell me what jet he's got and how many Ferraris.
And
I
then you
often
tell them what jets you got.
yeah, well, I try to just listen, and I catch myself telling guys sometimes later, I'm like, I like you.
Yeah.
You didn't need to give me all that.
Yeah.
I really like the you.
Yeah.
I'm curious about, by the way, I really appreciate your transparency
Yeah.
and your honesty about
Yeah.
it too, because whether you know it or not, what you've already said is helping people go, maybe this is fleeting.
Right.
Maybe what I'm leading with is hollow.
Yeah.
Not that we don't want you to have a jet and a car and,
Right.
and a beautiful home and great friends. We want you to have those things.
Right.
But what did happen that I want to touch on next is, because most people can relate to this, my first dream ended.
Yeah.
We were talking about this
Oh,
off
yeah.
camera, which was baseball.
Right.
And that dream ended, and I was left with, okay, what am I going to do next?
Right.
And that has happened to almost everybody listening or watching this. Their first dream, their business, their first career, their first dream relationship,
Right.
it ended.
Right.
And then you're left to pick pieces up
Yeah.
and remake their lives. The reason I admire you so much is you did it.
Right.
Most people, when that first dream fails,
Yeah.
they get knocked down.
Right.
A lot of people stay there.
Right.
And really, in your case, you were just kind of staggered.
Right.
You didn't actually, we'll get to the part where you turned it around, but what was it like as things started to unravel, and what did that feel like? What was the process like? What happened?
My God. It was this massive dark cloud that was just hanging over my head. And my biggest fear was just any minute I'm going to get exposed and people who are going to find out that I wasn't really this baller guy who could maintain this lifestyle. So I definitely got to the point of just feeling like massive depression. And I was trying to sustain that lifestyle, at least just optically showing that I was still that guy, but I wasn't financially able to do so anymore. And also the person that I was evolving. I started feeling a disconnect between my public persona and who I was deep inside. And so, I would say I've experienced, different levels of failure throughout my life. But that was like the first time in my life that I had experienced massive depression, like to the point where I literally felt like I was going to develop diabetes. I thought I was going to get different health conditions. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, like with my sheets soaked in sweat because I was going through so much anxiety. Every single morning, all I would do was walk around my block for hours because I couldn't sit still. I had to just keep moving. And, I also lost a lot of my friends at that time, so I didn't have a lot of people that I could talk to. I mean, talk about like the darkest days of your life. That's what I was going through at that point.
Oh my gosh, and you actually got down to, so he has these 9 exotic cars, the house, you're down, no house, 1 car's gone, 2 cars gone, 7 cars are gone, 9 cars are gone. There's 50 grand in savings, 20 grand in savings, 6 grand in savings. You get down to like $600.
$600. But in reality, I was way in the red because I owed so many people money. I had credit card debt, I had all kinds of debt, but $600 is sort of what I had in my checkings account.
Unbelievable.
So I was deep underwater, but that was how much money I left.
If you saw his content, guys, to think that this man was owing the world money, right? And I just think it's one of the greatest stories I could possibly put on my show for people to see, hey, you can do it one way and you may get, but if you do it the right way the second time, it's long lasting, it makes an impact. And that's what you're doing now. The thing you did though that I admire is that as you were falling, you were still swinging.
Right.
And that's a critical thing. As you're falling and the life's knocking you and you're staggered, you still have to punch back to some extent.
Absolutely.
So you go to this, there becomes this moment, and he's part of a traditional Indian family. You're about to move back in with mom and dad. I'm sure your parents are like, what the heck, right?
Exactly.
So then there's the family. Everyone listening to this can relate to pieces of it. The family being disappointed in you, the friends disappearing, the stress and the sweating at night and all the anxiety. And you're at this dinner. And what happens at this dinner?
So I'm looking for any way to just avoid moving in with my parents. That was like my only goal at that time.
Which is incredible for where you were.
How can I pay rent? That was my only goal in life at that point in time.
And how old were you then?
30 years old.
30,
and that's the hard part, is that, everybody has a vision for their life. And I certainly didn't imagine being 30 years old on the verge of moving in with my parents with only $600 in my bank account, right? And
you had debt, legal issues, there's all kinds of stuff going on.
All kinds of
everything
problems.
You could have.
Everything you could imagine was going wrong for me. And so that certainly wasn't the vision of my life. Celebrating my 30th birthday, not even able to afford the drinks I'm buying at the bar. It was so embarrassing. And so, at that time, I was just like, I am looking for any opportunity, any sort of lifeline that I could find that could take me out of this situation. And that's the thing, is like, for opportunity, it's all about the right mindset, right? Because there's opportunities that are around us all of the time. But if you're not open-minded and looking for those opportunities, you could easily miss it. And that day that we're talking about could have easily been a day that opportunity just breezed right by me. So I'm at this dinner, and this makeup artist, I know nothing about makeup, right? And this makeup artist is telling me how she's traveling all over the world. She's teaching these makeup seminars. Girls are paying $300 and $400 a pop, and they're selling out. So she's this international teacher. And I just asked a simple question. I said, have you thought about taking that concept online? And she responds and she goes, actually, that's a great idea. And I literally don't even think I thought about it. The words just came out of my mouth as if it was some external force like pulling it out of me. Right. And I was like, I can do it. That's it. And here I am, a guy that knows nothing about makeup, has never built a website, that knows nothing about online education or anything like that. And she looks at me and she goes, okay.
Oh my gosh.
And so I'm like, all right, online classes. Thank God it's digital content, which doesn't, it's not like I have to go through product development and, you know, spend thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars to develop prototypes and these things. So I'm like, all right, she obviously had no idea how little money I had and how little expertise I had. I was far over my head, but I was desperate, and desperation is the mother of all invention, right? So I take that $600 and I say, okay, I need to get, what do I need? I went to Best Buy, and first thing that I got was softbox lights, the cheapest you could buy with the webcam, $400 gone. I got $200 left to my name. Then I'm like, I need a website. So I go on Craigslist and I put out an ad that, hey, I need to build an online school for 200 bucks. I got, you know, probably 100 emails. 99 of them told me that I'm crazy, go to hell, no one's ever gonna do that. And for some reason, I got this one guy that said, you know what, that's really, really low. I'll do it for 200 bucks, but if it works out, just kick me a little bit of money, you know, extra afterwards. And I was like, thank God. I launched the website. We recorded our first class. She had a big social media following. She blasted out this class to her followers, and then boom, just overnight, you know, we started getting a lot of sales in. And
to this day, then that turned into the box that you all have too, right? So give us an idea. What's that turned into now?
So it started with online content, and then I started just working with different makeup artists to teach online classes. And then one of the models for one of the classes I was in turned out to be my now fiance and baby mama, who also, you know, had an extensive makeup experience. So as we built a relationship, I was telling her I had a greater vision than just doing online classes. And so by adding her to the mix, she helped me come up with how to develop our own line of cosmetics. And so it started as a $600 investment. All the money that I had in the time is now a mid 8-figure revenue company that we reached within a couple years. We just hired our 100th team member. And so life has sort of just completely turned around all in the past few years.
Guys, come on. Are you listening or watching this right now? It's remarkable. What are the lessons? Let's unpack that just for a second. Number one, in the darkest moments of your life, you are one conversation, one question, one meeting away from turning it around. If you still have that reticular activating system, see, his RAS in his brain was programmed still to see opportunity, not to see all these anxieties and worries. You were still looking for some way out when there was almost no light left. Second thing is, he was willing to step into a space he was ill prepared for and figured, I'll figure it out when I get there. Too many people, preparation's important, but too many people are waiting on some threshold of preparation. Like, I gotta be completely ready. Champions step into spaces they're not ready for, and they figure it out when they get there. And then third, you kept swinging. I admire so much. Now, during that time, this is where it gets good, guys. Now we're gonna take some note taking. It's one of my favorite stories, bro. It's one of my favorite stories because of the man that you became in the process. So everything in our life is happening for us and not to us if we choose to see it that way. Thank God this happened for you. Can you imagine if you... Right?
Thank God. But can you imagine telling me that at that time? I'm sweating in my sheets and Ed Mylett shows up and say, this is a good thing for you, right? Thank God. I'd be like, get out of my house. What are you talking about? You can't see it in your darkest moments. But what's crazy is, and we'll get to this in a second, is now I create motivational content that connects with people. And the thing is, I had to go through all that suffering and pain in order to understand what it feels like to go through so much suffering and pain, so I can connect with my audience and say, I have been there. I have experienced exactly what you've experienced, and I know how to translate that emotion into online content.
It's remarkable, guys. He goes dark for 4 years or so you're losing followers like crazy. Anybody on social media knows what it's like to lose one follower.
Oh my gosh, so stressful.
Never mind all that, and that's just like, you're gone. People kind of forgot about you. You know, in social media world, 4 years is 4,000 years, right? And what I think you did, and this is where we're going to get into content creation, so all of you that have 3 followers to 30 million followers that listen to my stuff, we're going to start to unpack how can you begin to grow in some of the ways like you've grown. Which, by the way, you're the fastest growing person on social media right now. I think that's arguably the case. I mean, I don't think anybody in 1 year is at 4 billion views and adding 2 million followers a month. That's just remarkable. I think you went from making motivational content, playing on people's motives, to creating inspirational content, which is to put people in spirit. That's the distinction.
That.
Yeah.
Can you say that again?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Well, I do. I think it went from
amazing.
motivational to inspirational. That's a subtle shift
Yes.
where you're playing the motives of sort of greed and excess and all that, which some of those things are fine, to inspirational, which is in spirit. So what are some of the damn keys to what you've done, right? Like in your case, what's worked and why is it working?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started creating content, I was dark on social media for 4 years. And I just want to make this point really quick. A lot of people feel like if you're ever staying still, then you'll get run over. You're dead in the water. But I just want to say to those people that feel like they are somewhat stagnant, sometimes it's okay to go dark for a period of time while you're figuring out who you are. Sometimes it takes being dark to see the light. And it took me those 4 years of stopping, not doing anything, really trying to become the person that I needed to be to succeed in order to get to the point of creating this inspirational content. So what happened was, I started, feeling like I was running this cosmetics. I was still running this cosmetics business. It's going extremely well. I run it with my fiance. It's going amazing. And I'm like, I still have this deeper calling for something. I want to go back to inspiring people, connecting with people. And so in the beginning, I started going in front of the camera and I would just talk and try to motivate them through my words. And what I realized is I'm not very good at that for whatever reason. I'm okay, maybe telling my personal story. And so I put out my very first video in 2018 on my birthday, on May 29, 2018. And it was just me telling a story about how you shouldn't give up. And so I posted that video thinking that, this video is gonna go viral. I was super excited about it. Posted it on my birthday, and then I kept refreshing and refreshing and refreshing. And it was like 100 views, 105 views, 110 views. I think that video didn't even break 150 views or something like that. But I was at that point in my life where I understood that things take time to take off. And I was smart enough to know that, if my first strategy doesn't work, it's okay. I need to keep evolving and trying new things to ultimately get to what I needed to get to. So then I started telling stories on camera. And what I did is I hired an animator, someone that was like $500 a cartoon or something like that. I still wasn't spending too much money on this. So now when I was telling a story, I'd have cartoons showing up on screen. And then as I started that level of content, it sort of took my views from going from 100 views to 100 to 500 views to now about 500 to about 5,000 views or something. So I was like, I'm on to something here. And then as soon as I start to experience some level of success, then I start to optimize around that. I start to double down and say, this is working. This is the direction that I need to go. How do I double down and go further into this? And then I started thinking, okay, cartoons are great, but they're not really relatable for people. So what if I actually had actors that showed on screen whatever lesson I'm talking about? Think about this. If I was to tell you, I walked past, a homeless person, or let's say this. Let me tell you about the key to happiness is gratitude. Here's the 3 different lessons about gratitude that you need to know. Yeah, that's interesting, right? Or if I was to tell you that, hey, I was walking home from the grocery store, and as I was walking home, it started raining on my head. And all I could think about is how miserable is this? I gotta walk home in the rain. And as I'm thinking that, I look over and I see a homeless person who's living in the rain. And that taught me about gratitude. Right? Which one are you going to remember?
The latter.
That story about that homeless person, right? And so I started getting into storytelling, and then I hired actors who would actually create these life lessons that we're talking about, and I would just be a small piece at the end who would just talk about the lesson that's the key takeaway from whatever story that's being seen on screen. And as soon as I started making that shift, that's when I started to see my views really start picking up.
Okay.
But it wasn't just like instantly I started going viral or anything.
Right.
I still struggled with failure for quite some time with that strategy until I finally got a video that went viral.
There's a couple things you said there that are so profound. Number one, the market will tell you whether your content's working.
Absolutely.
Right? So if you're constantly posting the same sort of thing and it's not getting a response, it's telling you that people aren't responding to that. Number one. Number two is storytelling, which is huge. Now, not everybody out there can afford to hire actors.
Right.
But if you begin to create pieces of content once or twice a week where it's exactly what you just said, it's just you telling a story that's happened from your life. It's so important you say that, because oftentimes people will tell me, why would anybody want to see my content? I'm not successful yet.
Yeah.
Because you have stories.
Right.
So your story of sitting in the grocery line at the store and something interesting happened can be something that moves people, right? You at the bank, and also documenting stories that happen for you as well. Telling stories and just documenting things you do are more interesting than you think they are. Look at reality television today, everybody. You know, the Real Housewives of these different shows. We have many friends on those shows that are our dearest friends. Not all of these people, some of them are, but not all these people are mega rich people. It's just the documentation of their existence. Let me ask you a third element of it that I see. Emotion.
Oh, sorry, just one last aspect.
Sure.
In the beginning, I wasn't spending money either. I was having my fiance's brother be
the actor. Is that right?
I was shooting on my iPhone. So you literally can do it bootstrap with no resources.
Really
Sorry,
glad. No, super glad that you've interjected that. Like I said, that's huge too. And by the way, some of the funniest stuff online, look at TikTok. TikTok, that platform is everyday people kind of acting and lip syncing and doing stuff like that. So you don't have to have actors all the time. Also, though, I've heard you talk about this before. Emotion's important.
Absolutely.
How so? What do you mean by that?
So the number one comment that I look for is, this video made me cry. If you could make somebody feel something, then they'll always remember that story because of the emotion that they felt. So my goal is always to emotionally move people. And I'll know that I'm onto a big idea because as I'm writing the idea, I'll literally start to get teary-eyed just reading the idea that I'm writing. Or have you ever posted something on Instagram and something that was very heartfelt, and as you're reading your caption, you're almost emotionally moved, or it's taking you to a certain place, and then that ends up being like your most viral post or your best performing post? If you can extract that emotion and put that into your content, then your audience will feel that emotion. And that was one thing I realized is, because I'm not a filmmaker, I didn't go to school for this. I had no background in creating film or anything like that. But when I'm looking at a screen, I'm like, what moves you emotionally? Once you start to see actors get all teary-eyed and their eyes get red and tears are flowing, that naturally makes you start to feel emotional as well. And so if you can move people emotionally, then they're more likely to tell people about that video. They're more likely to hit that share button. They're more likely to say, hey, did you see this video? Oh my God, I can't stop crying. You have to watch this.
What creates crying? So are there certain elements? Is it our existence on earth, our dreams, our families, our faith? Are there certain, I don't want to call them buttons, but key points that you feel like are more likely to induce emotion in somebody?
Relatability. That's what I've come to realize. I get this so often that, oh my God, this video reminded me of my dad. And I miss my dad so much. I wish he was here. Or this video reminded me of my unappreciative ex-husband. Thank God I don't have that guy in my life and I'm no longer in that state. So if you can get them to relate to a part of their own life that they've experienced, even indirectly, then you can help drive that emotion because they can remember something that they've experienced. And it could even be something that happened during their childhood. It could be something that they saw. It could be something that they heard. But if you can recreate that experience for them, that's what will move them emotionally.
Brother, so good. There are so many videos that I think do that. And I want everybody listening to this, break it down to where you are. You can be telling stories your way. You can be creating emotional. You can be talking about your dad. You can be talking about your children, your experience. So you need to be thinking in your way. You know, a lot of us just keep posting that meme. Keep writing the caption. Keep, you know, just a picture of us and our kids. Start to think about how you could tell a story in your caption as well, or through the video. You have this one video I just saw today that struck me. And this is what I want people to just get an angle that you did that was brilliant.
Yeah.
Because there's all different ways to look at a perspective. But it was the one where, and it seems like a simple one, it was the one where the man's checking out girls on his social media.
Okay.
Do you know the one I'm talking about?
I've got a few of those.
Yeah. Okay, well, this
But
particular one
yeah.
that I saw today, and what it was, guys, is just the pain that it caused for this woman
Right.
sitting there while her husband's screening in on looking at the stuff.
Right.
The power of it wasn't
yes.
him looking. For me, the power of it was her face.
Exactly.
You showing her face and
Right.
how much it crushed her
Exactly.
to see her man doing that.
Right.
And so it's just a way of, what you really did is you changed the wall.
Right.
Instead of it just being him, you changed the wall and showed her.
Exactly.
So these are little things you guys begin to think about is, not every video needs to be shot straight on your face.
Right.
Change the wall, change the view, show someone else, show the background, show
Right.
something, right?
Exactly.
Do you do
Different
that on purpose?
perspectives. Yeah,
Okay.
I literally can tell, I can use the same story or the same dynamic, but tell it from 3 different perspectives, and they're all really unique. So I could show the husband's perspective about a wife who doesn't believe in him, that he's gonna succeed in his business, and the stress it creates on him. And then I can take that same story and show the wife's perspective about how insecure he makes her feel because he's checking out other girls or he's constantly disengaged in meaningful conversation.
Okay.
So I'm constantly switching the perspective.
Yes.
I'll tell a story from a maid's perspective, a janitor's perspective,
Yes.
a CEO's perspective, and everybody can relate to some aspect or some character.
Yeah.
And one of the big reasons too that my storytelling using actors is so powerful is if I'm gonna sit here, look on camera, certain people, as soon as they see my face, are instantly gonna tune out. They're gonna just say, I don't like his hair. I don't like, watching this, this guy. I don't like the way he looks. I don't like the way he dresses or whatever. But with my actors, I can show every kind of person, every kind of occupation, every gender, every age, every demographic, something that someone is going to connect with and say, I have been in that person's shoes and I know what that feels like.
Is there a site you'd recommend? I didn't know I was going to ask you this for
Yeah.
B-roll. If someone can't afford actors but they want to get content like that, are there any sites like that that somebody
Yeah,
could see?
Video blocks.
Video blocks, B-L-O-C-K-S. Video blocks. Okay, it's just worth having everybody
And that's
have
how I
access to it.
started. And I
Okay.
still got really good traction by just using B-roll before we started shooting original content.
Okay, let's talk platforms for a minute.
Okay.
Let's go back. Let's pick this big brain
Yeah.
of yours too, because you're sort of omnipresent.
Yeah.
If I'm an average person, I've got kind of a business that I'm promoting and trying to brand and myself
Absolutely.
as well. Do you recommend I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all of the above?
Yeah.
Or should I pick one and try to dominate it? What's your advice on
Yeah,
that?
definitely. So first, figure out what comes native to you. Like if you're a person that's just not good at video, but you're really good at writing, then Twitter might be the platform for you.
Okay.
But if you're really good at taking awesome photos, but you're not comfortable with video, then Pinterest or Instagram is gonna be the platform for you. For me, I knew right away that I wanted to be the #1 most viewed content creator in the world if I was gonna create that much of an impact on people's lives. So I decided to start with the biggest social platform in the world, which is Facebook. Facebook is so underrated. I cannot emphasize enough how people underestimate Facebook. There's this perception out there that my grandma's on Facebook, so I'm not gonna be on there. There is one key ingredient that Facebook has that makes it such a powerful platform to conquer: the share button.
Yeah.
That's what it is. That's what it all comes down to. Because if you can create some piece of content, and you see this all the time where someone didn't even intend for something to go viral.
Yep.
They just happen to take a photo of their kid, or they showed like a little video of themselves like unboxing a gift or something, and the next thing you know, they're on the Ellen show.
Yeah.
That happens on Facebook so often because if enough people are clicking that share button, then Facebook picks it up in the algorithm and then it creates this snowball effect. So I would say if your goal is to get as much traction as possible, I would start with Facebook. That's the way I was growing the fastest because there's not a lot of content creators on Facebook because people don't take it serious. And then also it's got the most amount of people and it's got that secret weapon, which is a share button.
So I want everyone to hear this. You're in a relationship with everyone else they're in a relationship with. So that can be their friends, that can be their parents, that can be their siblings. That's also true in business as well. You get into business with another company, you're in business with who they're in business with. So do you think that's at least something someone should be evaluating when they meet somebody, or should you just be judging me on who I am and it's unfair
for you to, I mean, a lot of people listening to this right now or watching this are kind of nodding like, you know, one of the real hardships of my relationship is their family or is their other friendships. Should that be evaluated?
In a way, look, it's not the fault of our partner that they have a crazy mother or a difficult brother or we all have colorful characters in our family somewhere, right? Difficult people, whatever. I think the most important thing that has to happen there is we have to be able to trust that our partner is a good mediator of those two worlds. That ultimately, I am having a relationship with their family, but the one that's affecting me the most is my relationship with my partner. So what affects me the most is my partner's, the way my partner filters their family through them before they get to me, or when their family does something very difficult, how does my partner deal with it? Is my partner constantly bullied by their family? Is my partner constantly emotionally manipulated by their family? Because if I'm with someone and they say, oh, my mum's making me feel bad again because of this and that, and I've got to go, and we're like, this person's mother is a nightmare, or this person's father, or I can't bear this person. Often what we're saying is, I can't bear what this person is, the control and influence this person exerting over my partner, which then directly impacts me. So I think that in a way, we don't have to trust our partner's family. We have to trust that our partner is actually the one in control.
Wonderful.
And has our back, makes the relationship a priority.
Yes.
I'm not trying to pull you from your family.
Yes.
I respect what's going on with your family, but you also have to be the protector of our time, our love, our dynamic.
Right.
And if you're being constantly impacted in terribly negative ways that then come into our home, and that then does become part of our world.
See, I feel like there's two people listening to say, there's the single person who's getting all these nuggets, then there's the person in a relationship listening to this. This is almost one of the things, you've listened to this or watched it, you should then go back and listen to and watch this with your partner.
Yeah.
Because what a wonderful answer. And along that have your back thing, I have to ask you this. I've been surprised of all the business coaching I've done. Lots of different questions come my way in business, but it always comes back to relationships. The number one obstacle, or at least imagined obstacle, that the people that I coach, whether it's social media, my Arete Syndicate group, one-on-ones that I do, is how do I get my partner to support me more in my business? They're antagonistic to it, they're negative, I can't get their support. And I'm really not great at equipping them with an answer on something like that, because I think that's just support overall. But if someone were asking you, in the business sense, how do I get my spouse to become more supportive of me? I'm at a loss of giving somebody a quality answer for that. Do you have one?
There's if you're with someone who is extremely negative in general, then that's an issue. And we have to address our partner's negativity. Hey, I love you. But the negativity that's constantly being brought, if you've got issues you want to deal with and we deal with them together and we work on them, or you have stuff that you struggle with, that's great, we can be a team in that. But if you're constantly bringing negativity, because I say that on my retreat, even to the room, I say, we've got to be each other's partners here this week. If you're a toxic energy in this room and you're just bringing people down, that's not good. If you come to this room and you're like, I'm feeling depressed or anxious today, I need help, that's different.
Okay.
We can work with that.
Okay.
You know, so if your partner's just negative, that's a problem that needs to be addressed. I do think it's worth asking though, why is my partner scared of this? What's behind this? There's a motive here. What's behind this? And people should consider, they should consider that starting a business and going all in on that business is, in many cases, a highly, highly selfish thing to do. And that you shouldn't always ask the people around you to thank you for the most selfish thing you've ever done. You're saying, why can't you support me in my dream? All right, well, if we're doing that, let's find out what her dream is. Let's find out what his dream is. Because maybe there's some big thing that if they went full tilt on that and suddenly didn't have evenings or weekends and didn't have time and didn't have this, maybe you wouldn't be so cozy with it. But because it's your thing, it seems very, very, very important, and how could they not be supportive? So there is a kind of narcissism that often people have.
Yeah, I think you're right.
That that pursuing your dream can inherently be a very selfish thing. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but it does mean that you should recognize that because it's your dream, it doesn't make it someone else's dream. And if it's not your dream, then I have to show you that I'm committed to our relationship despite this dream, that I'm committed to the time we have together, to our love, that there's also a part of this vision that I am, like, I want this to be about what we can create together. But you also have to be careful not to bullshit people, because they can smell that bullshit when it's like, yeah, you're saying that because you want me to feel included, but really, this is about you. And it also is worth asking the question, I want you to support me here because this is really important to me, but you also need to tell me where I can support you. What's your dream, or what's the thing, what would you love to be doing? Because I want this to work for both of us, and I want this relationship to be one that constantly elevates both of us to do things that make us really happy. It doesn't have to be conquering the world, but what is it we want to do? Let me get a list of your things as well.
You're right.
And let's figure that out.
I think I've never heard someone answer it that way, Matthew. You know, and that's a really, I think I want to also emphasize one thing you said is, what's behind their fear? You know, I think sometimes we get so excited about these businesses we've started that they begin to think that that's more important than them.
That's right.
And I think also there's a layer behind there. I've always told entrepreneurs this. That safety thing you said earlier was so huge, and any change you begin to make, I think there's potentially a button that goes off in many people that you're leaving me. Now, they can't articulate it, they're not sure, it doesn't look like it, there's nothing you've done that indicates it, you're leaving me. And then on your side of it, I think you have to ask yourself, I think it's one of the foundations of every relationship is, you can work through all those other issues you've described, I agree, but the foundation of a relationship is, you have to believe in me. Do you believe me? If I have this dream, do you believe in me? That's the one thing I think you have to dig to the depth of. But you use the word toxic. How do I know? Forget just the business sense. How do I know if someone's toxic for me? I'm in a relationship with someone who's toxic for me. You use that word, and I love that word. Is there ways to just evaluate? Is this person toxic for me?
I think, one of the easiest ways is there a culture of kindness in our relationship, or is there a culture of winning? Because in a culture of winning, it's constantly, even in an argument, winning could be I make my point heard and I'm right, but winning can also be I inflict the most damage. I say the most hurtful thing that makes you cry, and now I got more emotion out of you than you did out of me, and I think I know for me personally, kindness is like, that's my highest value in life, is just kindness, whether between everyone. Like it sounds so trite, but I truly live by that lens of, I just want to be around kind people. And there's this insecure 19-year-old version of me that if he met someone he thought was particularly beautiful and attractive or whatever, it was just like, oh my God, I just want to go on a date with this person. Today's me, I could go on a date with the hottest person on earth. And if I found a mean streak in that person, I don't want to see him again. I just want to be around kind people. And I think that too often we value how spicy you are, how exciting you are, how attractive you are, how accomplished you are. And none of us are going, how kind is my partner? Because an unkind person is fine as long as everything's going right. But when something's going wrong, or when they feel jealous, or when they feel insecure, or when they feel threatened, or they don't feel like the most important thing that day, or whatever, they will fuck you up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
And you have to be so aware of that. And I think the toxic people, when we talk about real toxicity, it's someone who really consciously or unconsciously is always putting what their desires, their needs, their insecurities ahead of what is good for the relationship itself.
So good. There's this. You should see our folks listening to you here. Their jaws are open. You're a remarkable man. You're a remarkable man. It's your level of humility that allows you to have this depth of insight as you observe people. Then I'm really so taken aback with you. I'm getting such great value from this, and so thank you. 90% of the way through. They're going to learn how to connect with you in a minute.
Just heard that. You know, you were talking about where you come from a little bit. I just was like thinking about how you got started, and just how telling even the first night of your comedic life is like a pretty big night in your life, right? So just everyone doesn't know this. This is a guy who's working at IBM. Most people probably did not know that Jeff Foxworthy worked at IBM, right? That's what he was doing for a living. I think your dad worked there too, if I'm not mistaken.
That's how I got the job. I had flunked out of college. I was working at a grocery store, and I think my dad said to one of his buddies, "Hey, give my kid a job." And so it sounds more glamorous. I was carrying a tool bag and fixing machines. But it wasn't singing to me. I knew while I was doing it, I'm like, crap, this isn't my parking space. This isn't my lane. And I worked with a bunch of guys that would always went to the local comedy club in Atlanta, and they go, "Dude, you're funnier than those people at the comedy club. You should go up down there." And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't want to." And so they entered me without my knowledge. They entered me in a contest, not an amateur night, a contest for comedians, for working comedians, called the Great Southeastern Laugh Off. And they came back and they said, "We entered you in this contest." I'm like, "Oh crap." So I went and wrote like 5 or 6 minutes of material about my family. And I went down, and the first night on stage, I was so nervous. I won the contest. A minute and a half into it, and I was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I was made to do. This is my gift. And then I came off, and this girl came over to talk to me, and I was so nervous I spilled my drink down the front of her sweater. And I made a joke. I said, "Well, I guess you're never going to go out with me." And she said, "Well, you didn't even ask me." And that girl I've been married to for 37 years.
That's amazing.
So I met my wife and my career less than 5 minutes apart.
Unbelievable.
Same place, some night.
And by the way, everyone, there's a lesson in that, which is he went and did something he was terrified to do. And sometimes on the other side of things we're super afraid of, that we feel ill prepared for, is our dream. And that's not hokey or corny. Maybe it's even occurring to you right now, listening to me say it, right? Like, how'd this both happen that night? If you don't go do something you're totally terrified to do, not completely prepared for, you don't get your career, which is your dream, the platform to influence people like you're doing right now, nor potentially this amazing thing you're most proud of, which is your family. And it was because you did something you were freaking not ready to do and afraid to do. And on the other side of that was this gift, right?
It's the consequence of saying yes. It's just going, yeah, okay, I'll do it. Yeah. It doesn't mean you're not scared, but that's all bravery is being scared and doing it anyway.
Yeah.
You know, so, and I got over being scared to go on stage, but yeah, it's the consequence of, that was how it happened for me at the Mission. Is the guy looked at me and goes, "Man, these guys have never been in a small group of men, like to done a small group Bible study. Would you lead it?" And I certainly wasn't the most qualified guy to do it, but I went, "Yeah, okay, I'll do it."
Yeah.
You know, there's 5 million people more qualified than me, but I'll do it. Yeah. And it was the consequence of saying yes that it ended up being one of the most impactful things in my life. Yeah. And I tell my kids, Ed, I said, you know what I want you to do in life? I want you to fail. I want you to fail a lot. Because if you're failing, you're pushing the boundaries. You're trying to find the boundaries of what you're capable of doing. If you never fail, you've never pushed that boundary and gone too far over it to win. Oh, that's not my thing. So
Really good.
fail a lot, man, because then you're pushing it.
I love that. And God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. We all probably heard that saying, but it's true. I've experienced it in my own life. All these things I wasn't ready to do or prepared for. But and people say, well, how do you step into that space? For me, I must just say this to everybody. I know it's true for you too. My business partner is God. My business partner is Jesus. So for me, I got a good partner who's got my back all the time.
Yeah.
So I step into these things with some measure of faith, not really in myself, but in who's got my back and who my partner is. And that if I'll step boldly in faith, some of these answers and thoughts and the words and the whatevers, the people, the places, the relationships sort of appear because I've stepped in faith. When you don't step in faith, I think oftentimes those people, the thoughts, the circumstances, the meetings, the connections don't show up because you've not stepped into that uncomfortable, unknown place. That's just how I look at it.
I think you're right. And you know, you've got like this light and you're like a porch light where like moths are attracted to it. And so yeah, you know, it sounds kind of corny, but we live in a world now where people, they want the likes. They want it's give me the likes, give me the likes. It's almost important to get to the point where you go, I don't care. I don't care. This is what I do. You know, I know like within what I do, I would I'm not mean-spirited about it. If I hurt your feelings with anything I've ever said, please forgive me. I'm sorry. That was not the intent. So if you don't like me as a I don't care. I don't care. I mean, I hope you find somebody that you like, because laughter is really important. You know, it's kind of like the release valve that keeps the boiler from exploding.
Yeah.
But
how do you feel about though, Jeff? Like lately, like you know, obviously the other night when we're recording this, we'll be out pretty soon, but this situation happened with Will Smith and Chris Rock, where Chris Rock's making jokes, right? And you've had this situation. This goes to your special. It's called The Good Old Days. And he just reflects on some of the things that are funny, that are just also beautiful and sometimes better or just different than they are now. But then, you know, you've seen whether you agree with the messaging or not, but, you know, Kevin Hart's had the cancel culture. Chappelle's had major issues, and those are just a few. But how do you feel about, because comedy is art, right?
Yeah.
And so what are your thoughts on this? Like, that's not funny to me, so you're a bad dude type stuff.
We have a real hard time as a society of laughing at ourselves now. And within that lies the problem, because we have to give up our need to be right. When you have to be right, then the other has to be wrong. And people don't want to engage in any kind of relationship where they have to be wrong all the time. And so they just go the other way. And as a comic, it's kind of our job to just hold things up and go, why do we do this? Why do we do that? We're truth tellers. Why do we do this? Why do we do this? And when people start attacking that and they don't have the ability to laugh at themselves, it means they think that they've got it all figured out. And none of us have it all figured out. You've got your lane and you've got a lot of that figured out, and I got my lane and I got a lot of that figured out, but there's a lot of other lanes I know nothing about. And so every day you and I are both coming to 100 forks in the road, and we're having to go, do I go this way or that way? And we're all doing the best we can, but I don't have to be right. There were things that I argued vehemently for when I was 20 that at 60 I go, nah, I've kind of changed my mind on that one.
Me too.
So
totally agree with you. I got to tell you something. It's interesting that people ask me, the older you get, you know, what have you learned? And I said, honestly, one of the things I have learned is how little I know. I thought I knew a lot more at 30 than I know I don't know now at 50. And I'm always concerned when I have a friend who never changes their mind, right?
Yeah.
Mine should change, more information. We should evolve, we should mature, right? It always concerns me when someone never changes their mind, never says, I'm sorry. Oops, I made a mistake.
What that tells me is you haven't researched it at all, or you haven't engaged in conversation on it, you know. Because I've changed my mind about a million things. And if I had any advice. I was telling my youngest daughter this the other day, and I love this child so much, but when she's not the child I want to be with when I have my heart attack, it's my oldest one who's very calm in there. But I told her, I said, you want to know what? I said, baby girl, the biggest thing that I've learned in life, the most helpful thing that I've learned in life is this. And like I said, I'm visual. I go, let it go.
Let it go.
And I literally, I mean, I know you guys are listening to me, but I'm opening my hand and I go, let it go. I used to be the guy when I was 20 and somebody cut me off in traffic, I'd be on his bumper and I'd be changing lanes, yelling at him and screaming. And now it happens and I go, let it go. Let it go.
Why do you think we don't? You think we think we can control everything? You think that's what it is?
Yes. Yeah. And something like COVID shows you don't have control over anything. You don't have control over where you get this little invisible virus that may or may not kill you. You don't have any control over what's going on in Ukraine right now. You don't have any control over what's going on, sadly, in the houses of Congress right now. And you have very little control over things, but that doesn't mean it's hopeless. It's the one who spoke the universe into existence has control. And if you will rightly take your place in this and go, hey, I don't have control, but I trust you and you do. So, and you've given me these gifts. So let me quit wasting time being pissed off at dad, or let me quit wasting time yelling at the guy in traffic. And let me use these gifts and these things, everything. If you look around, I'm looking at your office here behind you. You got a poster on the wall. It was created for a purpose, to promote this book. This chair I'm sitting in was created for a purpose, so somebody didn't have to stand up. So if you do believe in a creator, and these things, these simple things were created with a purpose, then what about you and me? And it's not my purpose. God, what a waste of time. What a waste of my lap if I'm going to be yelling at somebody in traffic or sitting home wrenching my hands over what's going on in, what's going on in places I don't have any control over. Let me deal with what I have control over. I have control over being a good dad. I have control over being a good husband. I have control over being a good steward of this gift that I've been given. I don't have any control over what somebody thinks about me. So I'm letting that go. I love you, but I'm letting it go.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. And speaking of that, I want to go right to it. If I'm going to get you on the show, I want to really help as many people I know and serve as many people as you do. And you've gone right to it. We're in this time where there's so much uncertainty externally in people's lives. What's happening on with the pandemic, masks, no masks, all the political discourse, all this stuff, this noise, this uncertainty. And I think there's so much angst and anxiety in our culture right now. So many people listening to this or watching it right now. What would you say to them that are experiencing those emotions right now? What advice would you give them?
They got to turn off the news. I know that sounds overly simplistic, but you got to at least turn it off a little bit so you can get a breath, because unfortunately today it's hard to turn it off since it follows you. I mean, most people have seen The Social Dilemma. They understand that literally you are being tracked in every single thing you speak, say, do, and everything you're going to see. And it's different if you type in global warming and you're one person, you're going to complete different set of answers than if you type in global warming and you're another person. So we're living in a world where it's hard to find truth. And so the first place you got to realize is you can't control out the outside world. You can influence it, but we can't control the inside world. And if you get yourself overwhelmed, it's because all this is coming at you. You got to slow it down, stop it, and say, now, what am I going to create out of this insanity? Because that's the great thing that happens. And I know it sounds, optimistic and I think you know me well enough. I'm not one of those positive thinkers. I've never been. I believe in intelligence. I believe in seeing things as they are, but not worse than it is. So you don't try. But then you got to see it better than it is, or you can't make it better. And then you got to go to work and get the right strategies to make it happen. So for me, it's really slow it down. And everyone needs a compelling future. What do I mean by that? Anybody can deal with a tough today if they have a compelling tomorrow. But what's happened is there are a large number of people that after the first run of 2020, we were coming into January, and I remember that, and people are like, all right, now it's a new world, it's a new life, it's going to go great. And then, all of a sudden more people died in 2021 with vaccines and with all these details that we have. And so people are uncertain. And now we got Omicron and people are making it like the Great Plague. when if you actually look at the science, the vast majority are showing it's more like a cold or a really gentle flu. But it doesn't matter. We're tracking everything now. If you imagine if we were tracking the flu constantly and where it was, we don't test everybody so we don't freak out all the time. So what are you going to do to create a compelling future for yourself? What do you really want this year to be about, regardless of what's going on in the outside world? You might say, well, Tony, that's easy to say, but they're controlling my business or they're shutting me down here. You can move. You know, you can make new choices. I know they're not easy ones, but you got to get to the point where you say, I won't settle for less than I can really do, be, share, create, and give in my life, for my family, for myself, for what I want for my life. There's a point we got to say enough is enough, and you got to start to take control.
How do you do that? One of the things that you say that I love is fear is physical. And what I learned from you so many years ago that transformed my life is to begin to learn to change my state with my physiology.
Yes.
Everything in my life starts with my physiology, from my fitness, but also when I'm feeling something I don't want to feel, I try to shift my physiology. And I just heard you recently say this, so I'd like you to speak to it, that fear is also a physical thing. I want you to elaborate a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, if you're concerned about COVID, according to CDC, and I have this in my new book, the number one, issue besides age, obviously, the number one piece is being overweight, right? Or obese. That is number one. And just this week, CNN, New York Times, for the first time, 2 years later, are coming and saying, well, you can reduce your risk if you take care of your body, right? Do you know what number two is, according to the CDC? Fear. Because when you get fearful, it changes your breathing, your body temperature, your tension in your body. All these things can create a trigger of reactions, hormones in your body that make you crazy. So when I say fear is physical, here's what I mean. Fear is physical, by the way, so is courage. Emotions are physical. If you're really scared, have you ever been at that point where you're like freaked out about something and you can't quite fully swallow, or you got that feeling in your gut?
Certainly.
But courage is also physical. That's what you're talking about. Like, it's like I trained myself from a very young age that the number one thing I had to do so I would follow through on the things we're talking about here is I had to have a mind and body that were strong together. That every day I was going to do something to strengthen my body, even if it was just 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Something was going to shift me physiologically to do that. And so I get scared or I get frustrated and I go on a run, I go on a sprint, and I wasn't in shape, didn't matter. I pushed myself beyond what I was comfortable with. I go lift weights and I pushed beyond what I was comfortable with. And when you do that, everything in your nervous system changes. Because all of a sudden, when you face something and you push beyond the comfort zone, you get stronger and stronger. Even a little bit each day changes things. So think about it. Courage, you're not afraid, because there'd be no need for courage. Courage is you're scared shitless, but you do it anyway. And so training your body, and you and I both do this, right? We train intensely because we know this is the resource through which my mind's going to try to make decisions. And then the second thing is every day you got to feed your brain, your mind, because if you don't, crap is going in there automatically. We all know that, right? I mean, today it's chasing you because we all know, the news knows, they're not bad people, they're good people. They're just doing their job. Their job is make sure they make as much money for their shareholders. And they know one formula works. And it's pretty obvious these last 2 years more than ever. If it bleeds, it leads. If it produces fear, more people watch. It's because we all have a 2 million-year-old brain that's always looking for what's wrong, what can hurt us. But your 2 million-year-old brain's not going to make you happy, right? You have to take control of that 2 million-year-old brain and start to direct consciously what you want your life to be. So changing your body radically by a workout, by a run, by a push, by whatever you're going to do, shifting by feeding your brain every single day, and then making sure every day you're taking some form of action towards a compelling future. Like, what am I going to make better? If you have nothing to look forward to, you're going to be pissed off, you're going to be frustrated, you're going to be depressed, you're going to be overwhelmed. And in those emotional states, even though you're a smart person and you know lots of things, you won't use anything you know. So to me, the leverage to changing somebody's life is always starting with the human body. If I started to speak to you and I spoke more at this tempo, and I said, Ed, I really think people should get their act together and make this their best year ever, right? I feel terrible in my body. Now, I'm not saying everybody needs to talk fast or loud like me. That's my own physiology, but it's kind of trained. But everyone has different gears. And when you're low gears, like you can be in a great relationship, somebody you totally love, and you're both in a great physical state, emotional state, everything's great. You both get a little low from taking the kids to 20 soccer practices and cash flow problems in the business and all that stuff. And all of a sudden, same love doesn't feel like the same love. You still love each other, but it doesn't come across. And if you're both stressed out, then it creates problems in the relationship. So the most important factor in your life is the ability to manage your mental, emotional state. is the one thing you have complete control of once you learn how. Then it becomes just the daily discipline. And it's not even discipline, it just becomes habit. To say, I'm not going to live in this lousy pace. I'm not going to put up with it. I know what to do. Let me do it. Let me move forward. But that's why, I do programs and events where I immerse people.
Yeah.
Because, you and I can talk about this a few minutes, kind of nod your head. But if I put you in an experience,
correct.
I always tell people a belief is a poor substitute for an experience. You can have a belief about China. I take you to China, you're going to have an experience. It's very different.
So true.
So I think human beings need to put themselves more in experiences. A lot of us today, especially with COVID, being stuck at home and doing business from home, a lot of people are stuck in their head. Yeah. I tell people, get in your head, you're dead. You'll just go in circles.
Get in your head.
You got to get that body and that energy moving, and then your head will start to work as well.
Okay, so you've all been listening now for, say, 10 minutes. There's two things already. Number one, do you have this compelling future? If someone asked you right now, what's that vision for your future? Second thing is, what are you doing in your body to create a change, to anchor things, to change your state? The third thing was Tony talked about his events, and I want to get this out on the table right away. One of the most incredible things is you've done events for literally millions of people from every continent, every country on the planet. And I mean what I said. I'm not saying that because we're friends. I think you've positively affected more lives than any person that I'm aware of. It's just true. And the fact that you now are offering a free event, it's just bananas to me. I mean, it's incredible to me. So I think it starts on January 25th, but I want people to know about this because this could be that catalyst to help, create that compelling future and maybe transcend your environment. So tell us just a little bit about that event.
I'll tell you why I did it. I did it, after 2020, about halfway through the year, people were just so depressed. You saw people gaining weight. People had no clear idea what they're going to do. So I said, okay, I'm going to do an event for the whole world. Let's use YouTube. Let's use all the different tools that we can. Let's bring them all together. And we had 400,000 people. And I was like, let me do one for 3 hours, but I'm not really capable of that. So I was like, well, we'll do 2 days. We'll do 2 days for 90 minutes. And then I made it 5 days. Yeah. And the reason I do that is not because I like to talk. It's because you need a certain amount of immersion. It's like learning a language. If you only learn a little bit at a time, you don't remember it 2 years later. But if I put you in Rome day and night for a month, you're going to come out speaking Italian. So that's my theory. So what I did was I did 5 days. We had 400,000 people join us. And every day we took a part of their body, their emotions, their relationships. And the goal is get them a new perspective, because it's hard to do that when you're at home, but not when you're in this audience literally of almost 500,000 people. Last year we did it again. We had 860,000 people that joined me for 5 days. So I'm doing one final one because I'm praying this is the last of COVID. Yeah. But I really want to help people here at the beginning of the year, because you see so many people now are caught up in what I call learned helplessness. When you've been disappointed, you get a gut check, but most people pick themselves back up. But if you get disappointed enough times, there's a point when your brain goes, the problem's permanent. It's just, or it's pervasive because I can't turn my business around. My whole life is over, which is not true. Or it's personal. There's something wrong with me. And so I want to break those patterns and give people a direct experience. So if you want to join me, guys, there's zero cost and you don't have to travel. So it kind of handles the two objections most people have. And it's, as you said, it's coming up on January 25th through the 29th. 5 days in a row, about 90 minutes each day. It's probably going to be more like 2 hours.
It'll be more.
But it's totally interactive. It's not you just sitting passively, and we're going to cover your body, your emotions, your relationship, your life, and get you to have a plan for 2022 here where you really can start to have a compelling future.
You have to make those distinctions when you're an entrepreneur. So the reason I wanted you on is you're tactic heavy. Like, you're known for tactical stuff. So everybody, the rest of this interview, we're going to get real granular on some different things. We're also going to talk about how to build a life too, because Candy woke up at one point at 40 and had a bunch of money, but didn't have a bunch of life. And so you can have a bunch of money and not be rich. You can not live richly. But one of the things you just said, I want to acknowledge, I still am cheap and struggle with what you just said, that I would be wealthier and I would have been happier. And I've had a lot of happiness and I built a lot of wealth. I'm done okay on that stuff. However, I would have more of it had I been willing to evaluate what you just said. What am I doing that I could actually replace myself and pay somebody for? But I was such a control freak and also cheap from time to time as an entrepreneur that I didn't invest ahead of myself to scale and give myself a life. So I want to acknowledge that. The other thing that's happening right now is, I think by every measurement, we're in a recession right now. I think we're in one. Now, to the depth of it, the length of it, I'm not capable of forecasting that yet. Maybe I'll never be capable of doing that. If we could forecast that, no one would lose money in recessions, right? But you have like 6 things that you can recession-proof your life and your business with. You don't have to share all 6. But if someone's listening to this right now and they're like, I think we're in a recession, what are some recession-proof strategies?
Well, first I want to say that when you hear that word, it invokes a lot of fear in people. And it's specifically designed to do that, right? Because that's what people click on. That's what news topics are all about.
Yeah.
But you have to remember the most important part. Nothing that happens in our country's economy will ever be more important than what happens in your own personal economy. And if you take the steps to really recession-proof your life and you do really well in the good times so that you can set yourself up to do well in the bad times too. Like, and what does that mean? It's all the non-sexy stuff, like live within your means. Like for years within my business, I wasn't making massive amounts of money, but I was living beneath my means. I was saving and investing money into real estate starting at 20 years old. So rather than going and buying all the fancy things that most people do, I was looking at this long game. How do I actually do this in 20 years and be able to retire and quit and be able to do whatever I want? So the first thing is that always remember that whatever you do is far more important and that there's always opportunity. That's why when I did the research for the book since 2020, there has been more billionaires made than any other time in history. Because when one area or industry goes bad, there's so much opportunity. So it's always keeping that in mind. Because if you're focused on the reality of, the economic downturn, and that's all you focus on, then you're going to miss the opportunity that's right in front of us.
Yeah, you're so right. The data tells us not only are more billionaires been created since 2020, but more millionaires are created during recessions than any other time, whatever even recession means. And I think you make a really good point about that. This live below your means thing, it's interesting to me. When I actually meet a legitimately wealthy person, and I am one also, the commonalities are striking and they're simple things. Like, I want to just accent something you said there, and I want to maybe talk about it a little bit more too. Living below your means is an absolute. There's this vogue thing out here right now on social media, everyone says, get rid of all the money you make because it'll keep you hungry, right? Get rid of all the money you make, which is really stupid advice said during booming economies, which sounds really good when money just keeps flowing in. But what happens if and when that gets reduced or if and when that slows down? So it's like the worst advice by a bunch of people that don't know what they're talking about, that got wealthy like in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. I've been wealthy for 30 years. You've been wealthy a long time. The things we talk about actually work, right? And so I've lived below my means. And I want to just say this to everybody. I'm talking about like being a crazy person going, you know what? I spend $4 on a coffee at Starbucks. I can make one at home for 90 cents. I'm saving the $3 in some sort of save. Are you that nuts about it? Because I think if you don't save money when you don't have a lot, you're probably not going to save money when you do have a lot.
Absolutely. It's a habit. Like how you build wealth is a habit. And when you start developing that habit, when you have a little, whatever you develop, you're going to do the same thing when you have a lot. Yeah. So, I mean, I could go at any point in my life, I could have went and bought the Rolls Royce, the Bentley, the whatever. And I just couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to do it. I still drive a car. I never buy a brand new car. I never have debt on bad debt or car payments. I buy like my Range Rover, I bought 3 years old and I parked it right next to a client of mine that had a brand new one that paid $140,000 for it. And I'm like, that is the stupidest thing. Like, why wouldn't you buy it 3 years old? You could have got it at half price. Yes. You know, so I don't understand. I think the litmus test that someone can decide right now if they're living beyond their means is this one little tactic is if you can't save, if you can't invest 20% of your money right now. If I say to you, the only way that you can get wealthy is to take 20% of what you're earning right now and you need to start investing it, here's what you invest in. And if you say, oh my gosh, I can't do it, you're overspending.
I so totally agree. And what's really great about this conversation is almost no one talks about this anymore. Yeah. Like it's completely counterculture. Now it's like spend everything you make. I bought my first new car for my wife, by the way, not for me, last year. And I'm 51. I don't buy new cars. People go, man, your jets are unbelievable. They are unbelievable, and they're a freaking fortune, and I've never bought a brand new one. Yep. Why would I do that? Why would I buy a G550 that someone paid $55 million for that 24 months later I can pay $22 million for, and 36 months later I can pay $15 million for? And I know those are huge numbers, but why would I spend $120,000 on a Range Rover where 18 months later I can buy the same damn thing for $68,000 or whatever the heck the math is on it?
Right.
I'm totally with you on that. Because I think, and by the way, if you're in a relationship, there's just two types of people in life. There are savers and spenders. And if you live alone, you're either a saver or a spender. You want to build the habit of being a saver and an investor. If you're married to somebody, I hope at least one of you is a saver. Here's a formula for a broke marriage: 2 spenders.
Yes.
Do you agree with that? 2 spenders that
100%.
are in a marriage together are toast. They cannot physically make enough money to ever get wealthy because they spend. So I'm with you on that. Okay. Someone's listening and they say, all right, I'm actually listening to this and I have a job. And I don't think I always want to have one. The self-employed thing sounds a little better, but the business owner thing sounds really good. You have something in here that you talk about how to start a business while keeping your steady paycheck. I think you and I did it the same way in the same industry, but I'll let you talk about what you think one of those ways is.
So the easiest way to keep your job and do something else is to find, what do you already have experience in? What do you have skills in? This isn't about like start posting on the internet that you are a business coach if you've never built a business. Like it drives me insane. Like have integrity, what you have experience in, what you have skills in, and you can start doing that on the side for yourself. It opens you up to building a business. You can get an LLC. It opens you up to tax savings, which we talk about in the book too. Like when you are a business owner or a real estate investor, now you have the same thing that these massive corporations pay millions of dollars in lobbyists to get breaks. Now you have them too. So if you're doing something currently in your job, just do it for yourself. It could be going on Upwork or Fiverr. It could be, going to Facebook group in a community that you live in and say, hey, I'm an electrician, but I'm also taking a little bit of side jobs on the side. Contact me here. I've seen people build massive businesses, stringing lights and doing landscaping and turning into a real business so that they don't, it's easy for people to say, burn the boats, create the business. But sometimes if you have a family to depend on, that's reckless advice.
Man, like you're totally right. And this is, again, everybody, why today is so important to me is I have real deep concerns about the advice I see being thrown around on social media and in a lot of coaching programs that will work when all of the economy is exploding.
Yes.
You almost in a good economy can't give somebody too much stupid advice because the tide keeps rising. Where you separate great advice from so-so or terrible advice is when the economy recesses to some extent. That's when all of the flaws in something is revealed. When there's a bunch of water flowing, you don't see all the rocks under the ocean. But when it starts to recess and the tide comes back, then you see the rocks and the bumps and the scary stuff. And so you're 100% right about that. If you have a family, maybe you shouldn't burn every single boat. Right. Maybe your kids need to eat. Maybe them going to school still matters. Maybe there's a transition period. Maybe there's a time where you're going to have 3 jobs, right? You're going to have your full-time job, another job, and your side hustle. And that's okay as well because it's going to make a great story for you someday.
And maybe you don't want to stress out your relationship. You know, sometimes people burn the boats, go all in, and then they're completely stressed out of their mind because now they have all this responsibility. Yeah. There's another way that you can still build wealth and still have a great quality of life. And I think that's the most important part of the whole thing is it's like a lot of the advice I hear, which I think is what you're referencing, is it's like there's this all or nothing mentality. Yes. But in these difficult times, it's kind of like you said with the rocks are still there. You're just now seeing them, but they were always there. And I think with any industry, any vertical, any type of market, it's always going to. When we did research, I looked at the last 40 years of every market, the S&P 500, the real estate market, and it always pulls back.
Right.
So it's like, and when you really look at the chart over time, that's why wealth, business, relationships, it's playing the long game. Yeah. Because when you look at the chart, it always pulls back. But then in that opportunity, when you can double down because you've lived below your means, you've been able to invest, then you can double down in these dips and you can create more wealth than you ever would have if it was a straight up chart.
Oh my gosh, that's a fact. By the way, if it's a straight up chart, it doesn't let the little person ever get on the train.
Absolutely.
But when it dips is when small, economically small people like myself when I started, like when you started, it allows us to get into the game. If the chart just went straight up all the time, we've missed it.
That's right.
But when it dips, it's a good thing. That's what everybody needs to get. And I don't even know if we're in a big dip. We may be in a huge dip right now, and it may be not so big of a dip. I don't know. But what I do know is this is a great time to be living below your means, as is all the time.
You say that the way we meet our pain defines who we are. And I want you to elaborate on that. I've been saying lately that, on the other side of temporary pain, oftentimes we get introduced to another self. Napoleon Hill says that in Think and Grow Rich. And I find that when I speak about pain, so when I speak about winning and competing and achievement, I get incredible responses from people. But when I speak about pain and suffering and even death, and that that it will come for us at some point. I've been speaking a lot lately about my father's passing, that the depth of emotion the depth of the energy, the depth of the feeling is maybe 100 times greater when I touch on those topics than just the good stuff of winning and competing and achievement. So what do you mean when you say the way we meet our pain defines who we are?
We have a choice with our pain, which comes into every life. And the choice is we can either try to suppress it and ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we do that, inevitably, we are going to end up taking it out on ourselves in the form of depression or something like that, or on the people around us. Or we have the choice of being with it and acknowledging it. And it's not fun. By definition, it's not fun. But there's a way in which we can transform or like try to transform that pain into something else. I mean, I think that's the heart of the creative impulse for most creative people. They're like looking at something painful in their life. They're looking at their sense of longing and they're trying to turn it into something else and something more beautiful.
Is there a practical thing you can do every day to do that? In other words, when you are feeling these emotions of, I don't know, for me, it's not always pain. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just like melancholy or I think that's the right word for it for me. Sometimes this is melancholy feeling about things that I enjoy sitting in for a while. Mm-hmm. I do. But is there a strategy that you use? There is, because there's a bunch in the book. But is there one thing you would say to someone who says, maybe I'm ODing on melancholy and I need to turn it into something powerful?
I mean, I guess the question is, are you talking about being in a state of mind where you are enjoying it and grooving on it? In which case, I don't think you need to do anything differently. Like when you're in that state of mind of like, oh, the sky is so overcast and I'm loving this music, that's the state in and of itself to cultivate. But if you're talking about, well, I'm in a state where the pain is actually really painful, that's different. And a great technique for that is something called expressive writing, which I talk about in the book.
Yep.
And it's basically just the sheer act of just writing down what you're feeling without any thought of publishing it or anything like that. Quite the opposite, get it out, write it down, rip it up. And this is based on studies from a guy named James Pennebaker at UT Austin. Yeah. He's done all these crazy studies showing how powerful the sheer act of writing things down is. It improves your health. It literally lowers your blood pressure, improves your success outcomes in life, greater sense of well-being. So it's a way of discharging what you're feeling, but also what you end up doing when you write it down is you're sense making. You're like making sense of what's happening, and you're figuring out how you want to move forward with whatever has just caused you this pain.
The reason I ask you that is because in the book you sort of state this belief system that I agree with, that maybe these are the emotional states of creativity. Mm-hmm. And that when we look at art, oftentimes it is born out of these sort of emotions. When we listen to music that really moves us, it's born out of them. Even comedy, ironically, one
very
of my
much
favorite
so.
things. Most comedians are touching on something uncomfortable, painful, or the ironies of life. And so most art, why do I say this to everybody? Because I have the benefit when I experience these things, I create speeches that I give, or books that I write, or podcasts that I'm going to do, or content that I create. But a lot of people just sort of sit in these emotions. And you asked earlier, which is it for me? And I think most human beings would say this. It depends on the day. Mm-hmm. And it depends on how long. And so I want you to talk about this because I just wanted to ask you this personally. There's a point in time where I'm in these states of contemplating, you say the fragility of life and how you understand death has a lot to do with how you live. I'd like you to touch on that, give you a long answer here, give you a long runway. So there's that. And I do that a lot. Or, just allowing myself to sit in a state of it doesn't always have to be 150 degrees of bliss all the time, Ed. It's okay to sit on a kind of misty day and just enjoy the gray a little bit. Now, having said that, I think most people who have that proclivity, predisposition, or even disposition, which may be all of us, you can then sit in it a little too long, though. And that's what I mean by the abundance of an emotion, right? There's a point where you're going, now I'm not creating out of this state. Now it's impacting me the other way, where it paralyzes me or freezes me or it makes me tired. It can even impact your energy level. So what would you say about all that?
Yeah, these are amazing questions. So first of all, in terms of the creative idea, one of the things I say in the book is whatever pain you can't get rid of, make that your creative offering. And as you say, there's just so many studies and so many examples that I talk about of the ways in which creators do exactly that, and it's not an accident that so many of our great creatives over time were orphaned before the age of 18. Like an astonishing percentage of them lost one or both parents before age 18, because that's what they're doing. They're figuring out how to take that ultimate longing that they're left with and turn it into something else. But to your other question of like, how do you know when it's just right or too much? It's a really important point, because there's a kind of happy and creative state of melancholy that we were just talking about. And then I think farther down that spectrum, you get to something that looks more like clinical depression, where it's very difficult to be creative when you're actually depressed. I mean, depression is more about like an emotional numbness and a hopelessness and a sense of disconnection, whereas the happy melancholy we were talking about, you're feeling intensely connected. So the thing to do is to sort of tune into where you are in that spectrum, right? And if you feel you're slipping towards something that resembles clinical depression, like that's a time to get help, as opposed to only thinking, well, how can you can keep on trying to turn it into something else, but you also might need to be looking to outside resources for help with
what about this Buddhist? I think it's a Buddhist practice you talk about in the book, called metta. Is that what it's called?
Oh, yeah.
What is that? I think this is a tool that could be used by people, sort of in all situations, but maybe particularly the one that I'm discussing. If you could just get into that just for a second, because I think it's super powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. So metta is a practice that basically means loving kindness meditation. And I'm actually, by the way, I'm creating my own loving kindness meditation, which will be up on my website in the next month or so for people who are interested in doing my version of it. And that's susankane.net if you're curious. But loving kindness meditation, it's basically a form of meditation in which you kind of actively and consciously wish well-being, peace, good things, love to, well, interestingly, classically, you first wish it to yourself. Okay. And then after that, you wish it to people who you know very well, to acquaintances. Ultimately, you wish it to the difficult people in your life. You kind of like move outward from there. What's interesting is for a lot of Americans, they have a lot of trouble beginning with wishing these good things to themselves. So very often people need to turn it upside down and wish it to other people first before they feel comfortable getting around to their own selves. There's no magic though. You can do it in either direction.
My favorite time in church, I was raised Catholic. My favorite time in church, and when you're a little kid in Catholic church, there's a lot of stand up, sit down, kneel. We're going to say the Our Father. There's a lot of repetitive nature to the service. And my favorite part of church on Sundays was the one little moment where you get to turn to your neighbor and say, peace be with you.
Oh, yeah.
And I loved that part of church. In fact, I miss it because I don't go to that church any longer. And my dad said to me when I was a little guy, and this is even when my dad was drinking because he was still a really good man. He goes, I do that quietly all the time when I pass strangers. I said, what do you mean, Dad? And he goes, when I pass someone, like I open a door, I'm in an elevator, I'll just quietly say, peace be with you. I wish you peace. And he said, even when people walk by us in restaurants, Eddie, I'll do that. And that's a practice that I've had all my life, because a lot of times with parents, things are caught, not taught, right?
Yes.
One of the greatest gifts I give myself all the time is my quiet prayers when I see somebody. I'll even see a family at a table and just say, peace be with you. And just that feeling feels so good to connect with someone's soul who may not even consciously know you're connecting with them. But I have this belief system that subconsciously, spiritually, from an energetic soul perspective, they do feel it. And so I love that you bring that up.
I completely agree with you. I have total goosebumps listening to the fact that you do that. And I think not only from a soul perspective, even if you look at it just from a human evolution perspective, we are designed to pick up on each other's cues, and we do it in 1,000 ways that we're not even consciously aware of, which is, so I think people would be picking it up, from you saying that. And that's exactly what practicing metta does. Like I notice whenever I'm not as good as I should be about doing this all the time, but I notice whenever I do practice it, then I go out into the world and I'm just sort of like automatically doing some version of what you just said.
Do you know why it works for someone like you and I and almost everybody listening? Because it's going to go to the other thing I want to talk about, which is that I'm an introvert. And some people say, don't ever label yourself as an introvert. No, I'm introverted. And I love that I'm introverted. And I wanted to, the reason I share this, whatever you want to call it, technique or strategy that my dad taught me, it's just really an act of kindness. It's not really a strategy, but it's also something an introvert can do because you don't have to say anything to give someone a prayer. So it's my way of connecting with someone in the unspoken way. And I may never, I mean, there's the truth. I've connected with millions of people this way probably in my life that I've actually never spoken to. And I think a much deeper connection than, hi, how are you? Good. Have a great day. I think much deeper connection is to say, peace be with you. Or, I wish you a beautiful day. I wish you bliss. Like, I love saying that quietly to myself for another person. Don't you agree?
Oh my gosh. I absolutely love it. And I am sure you're radiating something at them when you're doing it.
I feel that way too. I do too.
I'll give you another version of something like that I do. It's
Sure.
almost like the flip side of what you just described. So
Okay.
I wrote in the book about this video that the Cleveland Clinic put out that went viral. Cleveland Clinic is a hospital, and the video was designed to teach empathy to their caregivers. And so what this video did, it takes you through the hallways of the hospital, and you're passing all these random people who you normally wouldn't think one way or another, except in this case, there are these little captions that are underneath each random person as you pass them by. And the captions tell you what the person is going through at that moment. And sometimes it's happy things like, just found out he's going to be a father for the first time. But more often, because it's a hospital, the captions are things like, under a little girl going to say goodbye to her father for the last time. Like these heartbreaking things. You cannot watch this video without tearing up. It's impossible. So once I saw this video, I started to do this practice where I just try to imagine what people's captions are as I pass them by, just in everyday life.
I love it.
And I don't know the answers, but there's something about wondering what they are that makes you interact with them completely differently, and care about them in a different way.
I love you. I do that too. And I sometimes, perhaps I'm making it up in my mind, and I'm just going to say, so I've never said this before. I've never thought about it consciously till you just said it, but everyone gets to listen to you and I talk about this, which is cool, right? This is no longer a podcast. It's just you and I talking. But oftentimes, oh my gosh, this just confirms what you believe so much more deeply. It just dawned on me. I do that quietly when I watch people or I'm in a place, and it's harder and harder the more well-known you are to do it intimately because someone sees you, then they know you. So it's a little harder than it used to be for me, but I do it. And I also, ironically, sometimes sense their pain, and I almost project a story onto them in my mind about what they are insecure or they feel invisible. Oftentimes, because I think these folks feel so invisible, this is my way of seeing them, even though maybe auditory wise, they don't know it. And so it makes me really even confirm your work even more, because I don't usually picture them in their most blissful or happy state. Right. I picture them in their pain and their sadness. And that just must prove even more deeply. That's how we connect with one another.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're designed to do it, right? Like the species wouldn't survive if we couldn't look after helpless children who come into this world as crying infants. Like, that's what we do.
Oh, God.
And because of that, like that ability radiates outward from there. Yeah. So,
by the way, if people wonder whether this is true, give them this stat. See, if I'm a business person listening to this, okay, what's the business?
I'll give you the research.
Yeah, the business application of this is maybe you should stop always trying to connect with people on their victory and their wins and what you or your company can do for them, but begin to connect much more deeply with people, which is their pain and their anxieties and their fears and their story, their sadness. I think you'd connect a whole lot more deeper, even as a busy person. But give us the research, especially the one about the songs on the playlist.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Give us both.
Okay. So the songs on the playlist, well, there's a lot to say about that. First of all, people whose favorite songs are sad songs like you, we'll start with the other way. People whose favorite songs are their happy, upbeat songs, they listen to them about 175 times. People like you who love the sad songs, 800 times.
Crazy.
And we also know that the songs that make people feel, the chills and the goosebumps and the real feels, they're the sad songs. They're always the sad songs.
Yeah.
And people will say, this is what makes me feel connected to, to the sublime, to the wondrous, to something outside myself. It's always the sad songs.
I love it. I love it. I want everyone to know that. And by the way, you and I both always want to give the caveat. We like sunny days.
Yes.
And we like happy songs too.
Yeah.
It's just, we kind of have a tendency towards the other. So you're also going to talk about this research, what I was talking about from a business standpoint. I think you're going to kind of confirm some of that research.
Oh yeah. Well, what I wanted to say about like people connecting to each other through their sadness. So like there's this amazing psychologist whose story I tell in the book. His name is Dr. Keltner. And he's done all this groundbreaking research proving what he calls the compassionate instinct in people. And compassion, what it literally means, that word is with sorrow, like with suffering. So it means, you're reacting to somebody else's pain or distress, the way you were just saying. So he's located this in our bodies, basically. Like if you, just one example, and there's a whole bunch of them, but we have what's called a vagus nerve. It's the biggest bundle of nerves in our bodies. It governs our breathing and our digestion. So it's very fundamental to who we are and to our survival. And also, when you see another being in pain, your vagus nerve becomes very activated.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's like the same nerve that's helping you breathe is also telling you to respond to the pain of the person to whom you've just wished well in the grocery store. Like that. That's how we're designed.
I love it. I just think everyone, maybe this could give you a different perspective on how you interact and view humans and one another. Just this little, I don't think even Susan, how big this theory is and that I'm validating as a truth. Because I think taken to its logical extension would change the way that humanity interacts with one another, how we treat one another, our religious and political differences, our slight nuances that make us different. This is what would connect people in a much more kind way. It would give leaders of companies and teams and businesses and countries a completely different perspective on how to lead and connect with people and bring them together. So I love this work. I have to share something with you about this connecting with people with their pain, and it'll take me a minute, but my audience knows some of this, but here's how correct your work is. My dad was an alcoholic and a little bit of a drug addict. And the biggest decision of my lifetime was my dad getting sober. And he stayed sober for the rest of his life, like 35 years. But about 3 weeks ago, I read your book because I knew we were going to do this. And the next night, Susan, I just want to share with you how profound this work is and these thoughts are for everybody. So I read your book. I read it in a sitting. And that night I went to bed. The next night when I went to sleep, I had this vivid dream of something I didn't realize that I'm 51 years old. And that is that someone helped my dad. And some precious soul stepped forward and helped my father get sober in the darkest moment of his life, when he was losing his family, maybe losing his life. And some precious human connected with my dad and changed my family forever, changed my great-grandchildren. People listening to this, you wouldn't be listening to this. And guess how he connected with my dad? Through their shared pain and suffering. That person was also an alcoholic, also a drug addict. They knew the shame. They knew the fear. They knew the embarrassment. They knew the frustration. They knew the depression that came with the patterns of behavior. Had that person connected with my dad through bliss and sunshine and rainbows, or their own perfection, their own lack of pain, they would have never been able to help my father. They reached my dad through connecting, through shared suffering, through shared pain. And then from there said, here's how I can help you. So from every perspective in life, the connecting point is here, and then how I can help you. Isn't that a great example?
Oh my God. It's an amazing example. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah. And I think I don't have that dream if I don't read your book the day before. I don't, because it opens up. That's why this podcast, I guarantee everybody, there's millions of people listening to this, driving in their car, on the treadmill, or with their family. They're looking at the next person they see just a little bit differently, looking in the back seat at their babies, and they're looking at someone at the grocery store, and they're going to think about their friends differently. And this is where change comes from. The other thing, though, I have to ask you about.
I just want to say I totally agree. And I have thought this before about like our hopelessly divided politics and culture and religion, everything. That I think what we should be doing is figuring out spaces for people just to be able to share their stories and share the pains that they've gone through without it being connected, at least temporarily, without it being connected to any call for policy change or a political agenda or anything like that, just for people from different backgrounds, from red, from blue, from everywhere, to just tell their stories. That's it.
I love it. I actually believe that, I get asked sometimes if I'd ever run for office, and that's highly unlikely. But I do believe that that's where change comes from, is just saying, just please hear me and listen to me. And then you can reach your own conclusions. It's when they think that there's a hook coming, or a pitch, or a close, or something we want you to do, is when people are turned off. And I think if you just say, just please hear me, whatever you believe about guns or no guns or school security or mental health, whatever the issues are, to hear some of these parents that just had this tragedy happen in Texas, and just to hear their pain, just hear them. And many of them have differing views themselves on what should be done about it. But you would reach a more beautiful and correct conclusion if you just listened to people and heard their pain.